I'd like to call to order the City of Saugatuck's Parks and Public Works Committee meeting for August 22nd, 2023. Will the deputy clerk please call the roll?
Baldwin,
Here.
Derek,
Here.
Young,
Here.
Johnson,
Member Johnson is excused.
Kimball, and Bush. Here.
On approval of the agenda. On approval of the agenda, I would like to have a motion to table discussion item B7, Canary in the Coal Mine, as we seek further information. Can I get a motion for that, please?
Motion.
I'll second. Motion Cherick, second DeYoung. Clerk, would you, I think it's a voice vote. Can we get a voice vote? Okay.
Oh,
I don't vote, but yes.
I'm sorry,
It's
Derek,
okay.
Here, yes.
Young,
Yes.
Johnson, here, Kimball, and Bush.
Thank you. And can I get a motion for approval of minutes, please?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
7/25/23, my apologies. Any seconds?
I'll second.
Motion DeYoung, second Roach. Okay. Okay. Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. At this point, we have a guest speaker. I am happy and excited to, introduce Ruth Thornton from Land Conservancy of West Michigan.
Hello, hi. Well, I kept it pretty informal, so I can kind of go through our general introduction of who we are. I'm with the Land Conservancy of West Michigan. To introduce myself, I'm Ruth Thornton. I'm the Land Protection Director there. Been there for about a year and 4 months, approximately at this point. And yeah, and I just kind of kept it general, but I kind of have, just kind of basic introduction. This is who we are and the kind of work that we do, but I understand that you may have some specific questions as well. So I wanted to definitely see how you wanted to structure this.
I think if everyone's comfortable, we'll maybe proceed and then we can generate questions from the discussion, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Yeah. So, so I'm with the Land Conservancy of West Michigan. We work in an 8-county area in Western Michigan, and I did bring some handouts. I don't know if I brought enough for everybody, but hopefully it's a small enough group I can kind of show you. So we work in West Michigan. I can just show the audience here in the 8-county area, and within that, we have done a strategic plan for that. So we have prioritized the areas that we work in. So you'll see on the map, we have basically 3 focal areas that we prioritize for our work. And that is the Big Four Thermal Rivers, the Lake Michigan shoreline, and the Eastern Glacial Corridor. I don't know if you could all see that below along. And then I went ahead and I just kind of, I know, your main focus is going to be, the immediate area around Saugatuck. So I just focused that in a little bit. So I made a map where I just honed in on this greater Saugatuck area. And I put in the areas that we talked about, as well as where exactly the focal area lies within that. And again, and I do want to emphasize that, we have those focal areas, but that doesn't mean that we only work in those areas. Those are the areas that a few years ago we said, okay, we have so much demand for helping with conservation projects. It's like, how can we best use our time and our resources and basically hone in on those areas? So that's where we came up with those focal areas. And as part of our strategic planning process, we also said, it's like, what are those areas that are really in need of protection and conservation in those areas that we should be focusing on? And that's where we have the conservation potential that you'll see on those 2 maps here. So the dark with the green, basically, those are the areas that we feel, according to the needs of conservation values on ground, the connectivity of those areas to other areas, so where those animals and plants can really move, where are those corridors that we can help protect those areas to make sure that, for example, as a result of climate change, those species can move as they have to, so that they can expand their range. And then also we highlighted those areas that are already protected because those obviously, we don't really need to work on anymore. So that's where we came up with those priority areas. Just to kind of give you a quick introduction of that. And again, just because something is a slightly less yellow doesn't mean we're not going to work there, but it feeds into our prioritization process. So if people bring projects to us, then we know it's like, how do we best focus our time and our resources on that? Another thing to really keep in mind is that it's like we look at a number of different factors when we're trying to decide which projects to take on and which not to. And that is both the biological values and the conservation values, but then also some of the more social aspects of the project. For example, what kind of project are we looking at? Is this something that we're going to end up owning in fee titles? Is it going to be a nature preserve? Is it a conservation easement? Is there a community? Are there local partners who can support us in conservation? Or not? And so basically taking all of those different factors into consideration, we have a scoring process. We actually come up with a number. We have a quantitative rating, but we also take qualitative factors into consideration. So it's not going to be like the higher the number, that's definitely what we're going to work on, but that's what's going to feed in. Those are probably our highest priorities. And then we kind of look a little deeper. We dig a little deeper and see it's like, what's going to really be the best conservation value and outcome in the end. And that's what we focus on. So if you look at the map where I focus in on these areas, you'll see I really try to highlight, it's like, okay, so in this area, what are the areas that we've helped protect in the past? So those are what's called community conservation projects. So those are those projects where we don't necessarily end up either holding a nature preserve, so the fee title to a property, or a conservation easement where we help a private landowner, protect it through a conservation agreement. But those are where we help local governments or municipalities in protecting the area. And that can be a number of different ways that we actually end up, helping with conservation. It can be us providing expertise. It can be us, stepping in and helping with the actual acquisition, but then the local government or the municipality actually ends up owning it, or some kind of combination. Those actually can be quite creative and quite fun, quite frankly, because we're really putting our heads together with a number of different partners. And at times you can work with 2, 3, 4 different partners, the DNR, you can get some grant funding, really trying to figure out how can we protect a certain property and how can we help. Well, we may not be the ultimate holder of either the conservation easement or the property itself. So that's a community conservation project. That's what we call that. And then we have the conservation easement. So those properties, I don't know how familiar people are with conservation easements, but it's basically, so those properties remain in private ownership, but we basically take away the right to develop it. So those are very, very specific. They can be very individual to the needs of the property. There are certain things that have to be in common with all of them to make sure there's conservation values are going to be protected in perpetuity. But it's basically an agreement between us and the landowner that stays on the land in perpetuity. And then we are responsible for enforcing that those terms stay in effect. So it's something where we, in perpetuity, will basically enforce those conservation easement terms, is what we call them, those restricted and permitted activities. But it remains in private ownership. They continue paying property taxes, and they can do, within those easement terms, they can do whatever they want with the land, basically. So it's actually a really good partnership between us and private landowners.
Ruth, may I ask a question? Is that when the person then dies or sells the property, what happens then?
The conservation easement stays in place. So then we work with the successive landowner to make sure that they understand what those easement terms are, because they stay on the land and they cannot be changed. So that's where we make sure when we're working with that original landowner that they understand that these easements are going to be in place in perpetuity.
So it's still private land, like technically the person owns the land and even the next successive
Absolutely.
person would own the land. So it wouldn't be deeded to the city or to any nature preserve or anything necessarily. It would stay as a private piece of property. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. So that conservation easement does get recorded. So it stays with the land, and if somebody buys a parcel, ideally, and really what they should do, the current landowner really should tell and legally has to tell technically, the buyer that there's a conservation easement in place, but really if the buyer does the due diligence work, they will know because it's on the title.
Mhm.
So yeah, those easement terms stay on the property forever. So that's why it's so important to really work with the landowner and get those terms correct from the get-go. And I put some information about those. That 6-page handout that I provided, that's information about conservation easements. So that goes into detail. It's probably a little bit more information than you really need to know, but there are some tax implications too. So for the private property owner, it's not only that conservation benefit. So often we have people come to us who are really interested in conservation. They've owned a land for, their family may have had it for 100, 200 years potentially. And they love it. They have this land that they enjoyed as children, their children enjoy. So having a conservation easement actually gives them a way to really ensure that this land will stay as it was forever and will be enjoyed for future generations. The conservation easement, that's a nice thing about them, not only have those conservation benefits, but also they have some real financial benefits potentially as well. Basically, in essence, you're putting a deed restriction on the land. I mean, that is kind of what this is, or what probably the closest thing is that people would understand what they are. But that also comes with a real value to it, because if you have a land that is, developable, you could put a residence or a parking lot or a mire on it or something like that. And then all of a sudden you take away the ability to do that. That is a real drop in value. So they can, if they have a conservation easement, they can apply to the federal government and have a property tax benefit off of that. So they actually, or an income tax benefit in that first year. So they will actually get a deduction on their income taxes for that, which can be significant depending on their own financial situation. So that's where, if we have a landowner, and most of them, I do believe, actually go ahead and apply for that. If we know a landowner is interested in that, there's things we can do to help the way for them, but then they need to seek their own tax and legal advice to make sure that they're getting the best deal basically in that regard. And then in addition, so you have the federal income tax benefit if there is a donation. If we purchase it, if we got a grant, which is pretty rare these days, unfortunately, but if we do get a grant, sometimes there's Section 319 grants from Eagle, that will pay for a portion of the value of the conservation easement. So then we have, if there is a donation component, they can get a federal income tax benefit. If we purchase it outright, it's really like any other real estate transaction. And then the other financial benefit for landowners, and this is good for successive landowners, not just the landowner who puts it on the property, is that actually it prevents, by Public Act 446, it prevents the pop-up tax. So if the property has been under one ownership for a very long time, and they put a conservation easement on it, that means that property tax will not increase with the change in ownership. So that can be a significant advantage for successive landowners, depending on the situation and on the property. Any other questions about conservation?
Is there a limit on the size of the property? Can it be done on a city lot and half an acre, quarter acre?
It could technically be. So conservation easements themselves really can be on any size property. But for us, we currently hold 123 conservation easements. And we have a dedicated conservation easement specialist because we have to monitor them at least once a year. So we have to visit each one, make sure that all the terms are being adhered to. It's actually a real investment for us to do that. So that's why the conservation easement could theoretically be put on any size property, but we have a soft size limit of about 10 acres. So if it's above 10 acres, then that fits our criteria. If it's really rural, we try to get it a little bit larger. But much smaller than that, there needs to be another really good reason for us to step in and put it.
Can a conservation easement be held by a different group if it's a smaller parcel?
It could potentially, not every group, has the ability to hold and to enforce those conservation easement terms forever. And there's actually restrictions you have to have, depending on whether or not there's gonna be a tax benefit. The IRS has some stricter rules. So oftentimes, if it's any land conservancy, they generally have the expertise and the ability to do that. But municipalities could theoretically, or counties. A few years ago, I worked for the Greenbelt program in Ann Arbor, and there we actually often had partnerships between townships and counties, potentially the city and then the Greenbelt program and even the NRCS with federal programs. And different groups within that partnership could actually hold a conservation. It just really depends, but it does take some expertise. But it's definitely possible. It's something that.
All right, and my last question, does it have to be held by someone? So if I owned a 100-foot by 150 feet long, vacant piece of land, could I put a conservation easement on it privately? Or does it have to be held by a group?
It has to be held by a third party that has the ability to do that. Otherwise, under Michigan state law, actually those interests merge. And then, so you really can't have, the fee simple be owned by the same entity or person as the conservation easement. It would be a conflict of interest in a way. So yeah, but if there is a third party that has the ability to hold those easements, really anybody could hold them, but they have to have the ability then to enforce those easement terms in the future. There's also a larger organization, the Land Trust Alliance, that accreditates land trusts. So we're an accredited land trust that means that we meet a certain standard. So there is a certain safety for the landowner working with a group that has an accreditation, because they know that group is going to be there for the long term. And basically, the conservation values of their property are safe, if you want to call it that.
I have a question. So am I to assume that conservation easement is if you are a private landowner and you want to make sure something is conserved? Community conservation would be for a city or a municipal body. I understand that there's different levels of conservation. So say, for example, we've got the airport property that we're looking at. Are there ways to conserve things, but still have some flexibility in the future, but make sure that it isn't going to get, sold to a factory in 5 years? How do you?
I think so. We have to kind of put our heads together and really figure that out. But I think absolutely conservation, that's kind of the nice thing about it, especially when you talk about community conservation. There's a lot of ways to make sure a property stays protected. And if nothing else, you could even contemplate maybe sort of restriction or something like that. But I think, but a conservation easement on that would definitely be possible. What you can do too, I haven't dug really deeply into the airport property, but John has talked to me about it, and I've taken a look at how it might fit into our priorities and things like that. But there is a possibility of even having a conservation easement on a portion of a property. So then we'd want to get it surveyed. But you could have a conservation easement on a portion of it, have a portion of it that is a little bit more developed or more trails, or maybe have more buildings on there. Conservation easements also can be, the legal document itself is actually about 15 to 20 or even more pages, depending on the complexity, because it gives so much flexibility. So you could potentially even have an area with lesser restrictions and still have it be part of the conservation easement, but just allow certain uses, and then have another area that is more restricted where there's less use allowed. And also there's, motorized vehicles are restricted to some degree. We do generally allow them, especially to do management purposes, if there's restoration that's needed, for example. But if we see any soil damage, then we'll work with the landowner to make sure that there's no soil erosion happening because of that, things like that. But we do generally allow, potentially some limited ATV use as long as it doesn't damage the resources. We do sometimes, for the conservation easement, this is kind of digging into some of the details of over here, but you can also have either a building envelope where you have some lesser restrictions, but it's still part of the easement. Or you can exclude it altogether, and then the landowner can basically do whatever they want in the area, as long as it doesn't affect the easement that's next to it. So it really kind of depends, but it's definitely flexible. You can be kind of creative about it and really figure out what is the best for the parcel and for the landowner and kind of go from there. But it definitely sounds like for the airport property, we could go a number of different routes, I think, depending on what you wanted for the long-term goals. Kind of put, some of the other handouts that I've provided is, kind of like an overview, partnering with local and state governments. So that's just kind of give some examples how we've worked in the past on those community conservation projects. And then our criteria for the land protection project. So that's kind of what we base the scoring on. So what are we looking for, in a property that we would work on it. And then also the last one is we call it a landowner's guide to donating a conservation easement. And that basically lays out, it's fairly detailed, but I thought maybe that might be useful for you to just see. It's like what our process is, because we've, especially these past few years, I don't know if it's post-pandemic or what is going on, we've seen a large increase of proposed projects, really to the degree that we can't do them all anymore. So we're really kind of sitting down, like we really need to focus on those priorities. Which is on the one hand, great. We're like, well, can we staff up? How can we make sure that we meet the demand? But right now we really have to kind of hone in on that. But yeah, we've seen this really large increase. So we're all hopping, which is again, a good problem to have, right? But basically, so when a project is brought to us, we basically have a number of steps that we go through. So we score it according to our scoring system that we have and according to our strategic plan. I also brought a few copies of our strategic plan if anybody's interested, and you can go online and we have it as in PDF format on our website as well. But we basically score it. We really take a look at it. We kind of do those quantitative and qualitative scoring systems. And then we bring it to a project review committee. And then if they recommend that we take it on, then we bring it to the board and they have to approve it. So that's kind of what this cheat sheet just kind of outlines. And then we have to do the due diligence. So on a conservation easement as well, it's almost more work than if we buy a property from the outset, because we're working on this conservation easement terms, working really closely with the landowner, make sure it's really a good situation for them as well. Help them, as much as we can if they are interested in claiming a federal income tax deduction. And really make sure that they understand that this is perpetual. So they better think about any rights that they want to either keep or take away on that, to make sure that it really will meet the needs not only of them, but also future landowners, because that's really important to ensure the longevity of this conservation easement.
I'm sorry, go ahead, quick question. So, thank you for being here. This is fascinating stuff. So Saugatuck has a lot of really unique public spaces that have come to us in a lot of different ways. And so what I'm curious about knowing is understanding what the conservation levels are of each of our public spaces, and kind of, do we need to do more to ensure that
my
these
exact question.
we're aligned? So to ensure that this is staying public use forever. So that's, all of it has different
Absolutely.
nuances.
And that's actually not as straightforward as you would think.
Yeah.
Because even, some of these privately protected properties, sometimes like the federal government, I don't know if you've heard, they have kind of this official GAP system that they call, you have different GAP numbers that determines, how protected a property is. You go from anything from a wilderness area where it's really super protected to like, a park where there's a lot of use, but it's still protected to some degree. It still has some conservation value, and then everything in between. But yeah, that's actually not quite as straightforward and as easy to do as you would expect, but there's certainly a way to kind of look at it. It's kind of funny because they actually don't see anything owned by us necessarily as protected, because they're like, well, you're a private property, but we're like, well, it actually is legally protected, but that's kind of a tension. So it's basically, taking a look at that property, and if somebody wanted to protect it or to, to develop it or do something to damage the conservation values, would they have the legal and the practical right to do that? And then what is the level of protection on it? And, you know, and not every, you know, sometimes it is absolutely appropriate to have an area where you have a buffer, say, of a wilderness area, and then you have more use in the outside, and then maybe even have some ability, you know, to log under certain conditions. Even the conservation easements, sometimes, some of them, we do allow logging under a forest management plan prepared by a professional and reviewed by us to make sure that it doesn't get clear cut and it doesn't do logging in a way that is detrimental, but in a way that is still sustainable for the future. So it really kind of depends. It's like, so if you want to do that, then really analyze, it's like, what can be done on that property and what effect would that have on the conservation values and how perpetual is that protection? Even sometimes some of the state-owned properties, I mean, technically the state can and does sometimes sell off the parcels. So technically those are not perpetually protected because the state could decide to put them on the market. It just kind of depends on how difficult that is and what the ability is to do that. That's kind of a long answer.
Can we get,
So how do we
Yeah.
do that? Like we, as a Parks and Public Works Committee, I think all want to get very clear on where we stand with all of our public spaces to make, you know, to ensure we're doing the right things by it. So how would we do that? Like, how could you advise us to get a better understanding of each of our parcels and parks and understand which protections it's under?
Those are all owned by the city or the,
Well, I mean, some are privately owned, right? Is Talmadge Woods owned by the city?
how much woods we have we have a conservation easement on a portion of that. So that would be considered protected because of the conservation easement. So there is a.
But we're confused. I mean, I'm confused. I'm confused. I'll speak for myself.
Yeah, no, it is very confusing. I've been working here for almost 3 years and I still don't fully understand it. Some properties owned by the township with conservation easement, and then Oxbow is somewhere in the mix, and the city owns a certain portion. And so that's the basic understanding that would be, I think, super helpful to begin with. And then airport property and some other larger parcels that we own.
Right, or like even areas like, how do we ensure that Oval Beach is never sold by the city in
Right.
20 years? You know, I mean, things like that, that I think that I would really like to see all of our areas that we consider to be parks and public spaces and understand the level of conservation at each of those
Exactly.
places is what I would very much be interested in. And I don't know how we obtain that.
Yeah, I think the first step would be to take a look at what you have, what exactly the ownership is. And sometimes too, there's different kinds of ownership. So ownership of land is like a bundle of sticks, they call it. You know, you can have the mineral rights, you can have the water rights, you can have the surface rights. So it's actually quite complicated. And some of the most time-intensive parts of us getting a property, and that's why some of our projects really take a long time, because we really take a look at the title. And then it's like, who can do what on the property? Because there's actually an amazing number of oil and gas leases on properties, things like that. So technically those are not protected as long as those oil and gas leases are in effect or could be claimed by somebody, which sometimes is actually, it's amazingly difficult to figure some of that out. It really takes diving in, taking a look at what you have in your title. So that's what I would recommend as a first step. Like, what do you have? What exactly is the ownership? Maybe even do a title search on all of them, just to see, it's like, what rights could there be extant on those properties? Sometimes you have restrictive covenants. It's actually kind of fun to see what a title will dig up when that even the landowners were not aware were on their land.
Will a title search show everything?
Yes, it should show everything. The other thing, so you want to definitely do the title search, that would show everything that's recorded. Sometimes things like utility right of ways may or may not be recorded depending on how old they are and where they are, but that you can see on the land. So it's generally anything, and then you kind of get on, you know, the legal side of things, anything that you can see, like if you're visiting the site and really take a close look at the site. And then if you get it surveyed, that would be another level of surety, but that's an expense. So whether or not that's really worth it, you know, besides the title search, you may wonder, like, oh yeah, I really don't know what's going on with this property. Let me get a survey just to really figure this out. So that might be something that you do on those properties with questions, for example. But yeah, if you cannot see it on the ground, basically, And, you know, for those really tough cases, a survey wouldn't show something and it's not recorded, then you can be pretty sure that, that you know what's going on with that property anyway. So that's kind of what to look out for there.
Who would be the best entity to hire to do something like that?
You can, I would definitely work with a real estate attorney and then kind of do that first title search. So then have them do a title search and then go through it with you. And then they can advise you on next steps depending on the outcome of that. But yeah, it is gonna, unfortunately, some of that you can do. If you have somebody who knows register of deed search and just kind of the basics, you can do some of that pretty low cost by just going to the Register of Deeds office. I mean, all of that really is public information. That's kind of the
I was
nice
just gonna
thing. But it does take some time. It's definitely gonna be an investment.
And
So-
that would show, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Ryan, real quick, do we have this documentation somewhere that we're comfortable with, or where do we?
No, we would have to do the title search. Yeah, we don't have that information in this
Okay.
building.
And then definitely take a look at the deeds to the property. Sometimes on those really old deeds, you know, you'll see things that are kind of like, oh, what is this? And you kind of have to follow up.
And that, like a title search for Register of Deeds would show mineral rights, air rights, wells. that were-
Riparian.
But it won't necessarily show old oil wells that were on the property or old wells.
No, but it would show all of the oil and gas leases. And then that's where you definitely want to take a look at the property itself, because then they'll often have certain terms, and if no production is initiated within a certain term, then the lease basically expires. But that gets pretty technical. So if there are really old oil and gas leases, then that's when things can become quite complex, and that's where actually it may take a long time. Oftentimes, it's nothing to really ultimately worry about. It's just something that takes a while then until you kind of get through those layers, figure out what's going on, you know.
So after you determine who owns it, so you say you do a title search by parcel, whatever, and you figure out the exact ownership, then how do you figure out the level of I mean, so say we did one for, I don't know, Mount Balthead, right? And you find out all the, you know, who owns what. How do you then take that to the next level of finding out what level of conservation and what areas are conserved?
It depends what the owner can do with it. So if, for example, you have, DNR owned parcels, you know, even though a lot of people would say, well, it's owned by the DNR, it's protected, they do actually sometimes sell land. So it's actually not as protected as you would think. You would really to have the ultimate level of protection. Nobody would have the right to do anything. So that would take some kind of a designation. So that's where, for example, like a wilderness designation would be that, because it's really in perpetuity on the land.
How do you find how do you find the designation? How do you search that?
That would be on the title search. Yes, I think if it's not either on the title search or within within what the entity is allowed to do. Sometimes with a city, there's actually restrictions on what they're allowed. But then sometimes, you know, by a ballot measure or by a vote, things like that can be changed. So that it just really kind of depends. It really can be kind of a risk management, a risk assessment as well. But it basically is, if it's not written in the deed and the city or the owner, whoever it is, the county, has the ability to sell it without any kind of, you know, either, you know, public vote or something like that, then I would not consider it protected.
Okay, so
But if
that
there-
makes sense, and it would have to
Yeah.
show up on a title search because
Exactly.
that's what you would have to do a title search if you were to buy the property, and that's where things, that makes sense. to
Yep,
me.
and that should all be part of it. And then definitely do that visual inspection of the property. If it's a really large property, you can even do it satellite imagery, aerial photography, things like that. So you don't have to walk every inch of it. But it is good to have a good sense of the boundaries, see what kind of, you know, infringements there might be on it, see if there were all oil and gas wells, for example, anything like that will give you some information about it. But it is a bit of a, it's definitely a time investment.
If there is a conservation, let's say on a city piece of property. And you mentioned voters changing things, can down the line, let's say 50 years down the line, can the voters say, hey, we want to remove this conservation easement? Or this deed restriction, can that happen?
Not with a conservation easement, because that is not, because that is that federal designation. I mean, theoretically, again, in 200 years, they could say, well, all conservation easements are null and void, but it's, hopefully that's unlikely because it is such an established practice at this point. But a deed, if you had a deed restriction, I think that kind of depends. There, I would definitely kind of consult with a real estate attorney, because often deed restrictions, like restrictive covenants can be taken off. But then sometimes that also needs to happen after a vote. So, and the deed or the document that describes whatever it is that's on there, that title restriction should outline exactly what the steps are that need to be taken to remove something like that. And that's going to give you an indication of how protected it is. But yeah, if there's not currently something, for example, if something is owned by the city and there's currently really no restriction what the city can do about it, then I would probably not consider it protected. But if it is, or if you put something in place, then you can see it's like, what level of protection is that? And that's where you have the different levels. You're like, well, this is really protected. It will be protected forever. And this is, well, this is, certain things can happen here, but it really is protected. And then you really kind of do an individual analysis like that.
And Ruth, is there a guidance on your website that would show the different levels of protection once we do all the search and then see where we stand with a lot of our land, or how would we?
We don't have
educate
something
ourselves?
like that, but there are different, for example, there's it's called the gap status. And that is, it's something that is fairly standardized, or actually, I think that it may actually be standardized across the nation. I haven't worked with that in a long time, but that is something you could probably even look up online. Yeah, to see it's like gap status for protected. And then you can see the different levels.
Okay, so gap status for protected land, is that what we put in? And then I would say, and that same language as we do this search should potentially start to pop up of like the varying degrees of which our land is protected. Does that make sense?
Well,
Or,
it would give you kind of the definitions of each level.
okay,
And then, but somebody has to input which properties are that level. So that's where you would have to then see how that fits into that level, or if they do, and then you would go ahead and send it to whoever administers that. I can look that up, at least to give you some kind of indication, like, where to start.
That would be enormously
Yeah.
helpful, because I
Yeah.
think that we definitely plan on running this to
Pursuing
ground.
this,
Yeah.
Yep, it's been a while since I've worked with that, but there's a few things I can look at, because there is actually a protected lands database. It is just, somebody has to send the administrator of the data.
And how do you even do a search? Like, is it a common name? I mean, Mount Baldhead might be called parcel 3724, so it's not necessarily, I don't think, searchable by common
Right.
name or any of that. That
But
makes
it is generally, it's a spatial layer, so you could see if something in that area has been designated.
Okay.
So that's kind of the nice thing. Even if because names are really hard.
Right, right.
But if you just look spatially on it, it should show up. If nobody has sent, the overall administrator of the data set, that property, I might guess it's probably not in there yet, but, I'd be surprised maybe somebody years ago was really into that. But that might be a good place to start. But that is kind of just that's really more informative. I think that is something that, if you wanted to make sure really that certain properties are protected, it's really kind of like doing that analysis, like what's on the line right now, what are those restrictions? Could somebody come in and sell them in the future to the developer, or are there restrictions?
do you have anything? that you can share as far as an understanding of this or? Yes, okay. Well, I meant about local, if there was a particular thing that you known about with.
Yeah, I can certainly just take a quick look, but, yeah, I think it's gonna take some time.
Yeah, we're gonna want to follow up with you about specifics. We don't need to obviously, workshop the whole thing right now, but yeah, I think that we have enough questions and places that jumping off points that we're definitely very interested in. So this has been enormously informative. I'm so glad you were able to come today.
So, excellent communication. And just to let you know, so we have been working through a backlog, and I think we got a lot of those projects. But in the coming months this fall, we are gonna take a look at all of them. So if you have something or if you have specific projects, please go ahead and, let me know. We'll take a look at them.
Wonderful. The airport property comes to mind. Yeah.
The airport property already on that proposed list?
It's not on the actual list, but it's something certainly John has talked to me about.
Right.
I think there were a couple of other ones that he brought up to me, but I'm not sure if they're anywhere near the airport properties, but it's certainly, 170 acres is something that is definitely, size-wise would fit into our priorities.
Mhm.
Part of the scoring system is also based on the size of the parcel, so the more acres, just because we kind of get a bigger bang for the buck. I mean, I don't want to discount the smaller parcels, but with a larger parcel, you already have some of it's a large enough area that it's some real conservation values. But if something is adjacent to protected lands, that's also really valuable as well, because it does increase the whole habitat area.
I would add Peterson Preserve comes to my
Of course.
mind. That property has some artificial dam that created a wetland. How would that,
It would not necessarily negatively impact the scoring. Sometimes that can actually be beneficial because you're increasing habitat. It just kind of depends on the nature of the dam. Like, is the dam detrimental or is there a potential positive? It's like, is there wetland created? Do we have more habitat for ducks to complete their life cycle, for example, or amphibians or reptiles, things like that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay.
We just have to.
We do have an extensive evaluation by ODC now of that airport property that I think would be helpful for you.
Yeah, I took a really quick look at your agenda yesterday, so I saw that. So that in itself would be very helpful because one of the things that we definitely try to do is like, what are the conservation values? And that also helps us score it better. And then we really know, just knowing what exactly.
Wonderful. Any further questions for our guest?
That's wonderful.
Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate your time today. At this point, we're going to move on to public comments on today's agenda topics only. If you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Have any takers in the audience first? Please. Please say your name and residence.
I'm Chris Clark from Saugatuck Township. I've met several of you. John Vanderbeek asked me to come and just sort of be a resource, particularly with the presentation. I wanted to mention a few things. I'm active in the Riverwood Council and the hiking club, so I've hiked all the trails. I'm quite familiar with most of the properties. I think one of the things that I've learned, I've been looking into easements and everything, is that real estate lawyers make sure that they understand that you're looking at an easement in perpetuity, because most of them are not usually doing that. Like farmers can do temporary easements. I've seen the airport property several times. I walked it with Helen before, so any way I can be helpful with that. I'm particularly interested in the Mount Baldhead area. I believe one thing that might help you as you look into the who owns what is to speak with the Land Conservancy of West Michigan, because I'm pretty sure they hold the easements for Talmadge Woods, and they're the ones who work. So they probably have a lot of research somewhere in a file. They might answer some of your questions. There are probably some sort of handshake agreements and some misunderstandings about who owns what over there. And I don't think it's going to be terribly hard to clear that up for you all. Any way I can help, I'm happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone online? See anyone raising their hand? Morning.
My name's John Kerr. My name's John Kerr, Kerr. Sorry. Oh, I live in Douglas.
I'm Renee Zeta, 985 Park Street.
So, we're here to talk about Mount Bald Head Park. And I wrote a little thing so I can get through my 3 minutes quickly. Mount Bald Head Park is arguably Saugatuck's most popular, most historic, and most iconic landmark. And I think that's evidenced by the 2 historic photos in this room of Mount Bald Head and the view from the top of Mount Bald Head. Every summer, thousands of people from around the country and around the world face the challenge of climbing to the top of the big sand dune with that dome on top of it. It's a real gem in the community. For the last 5 years, I've worked as a volunteer at the Pump House Museum, so I get to meet these people, and we have a map, and we ask people to put a pin in the map to show us where they've come from. And I can attest that every year we have hundreds and hundreds of people from around the world coming to visit that site. Yet compared to other city parks in Saugatuck, Mount Bald Head Park is in sad shape. It's been neglected over the years with minimal maintenance and needs attention. The lovely old picnic pavilion is dirty. The roof is covered with years of debris, and rafters are filled with birds and the messes that they make. The electricity doesn't work at all. The light bulbs are dangling from wires from the ceiling. A couple of the picnic tables are simply rotting. It's not a place that families want to enjoy a picnic with a view over the river. The restrooms are primitive and haven't been updated in decades. Renee tells me they look just like they did 20 years ago when she was a little girl. Fine. They never seem clean. The doors don't close on either one. And the fixtures are just ancient. They're definitely not family friendly. People don't want to send their children into them. But on the plus side, they do have running water. At the top of the stairs, the wooden viewing platform is sliding down the dune. If you walk around it, there are rotting timbers in numerous places. And up until last year, the walk off the platform was a 4-foot drop to get to the sand when you had to cross the power line to the radar station. There's a lot of hazards up there. So because of its popularity with all the tourists and the locals as well, the facilities at Mount Bald Head get a lot of wear and tear, but it's this very popularity that we feel makes it incumbent upon the city to step up and with the help of volunteers like us, make it a place that we can be proud of once again. So, that's my.
I'm the emotional part.
Thank you. My family has a home on Park Street from 1932. This is my grandmother and my uncle and uncle. Probably in Crawford. And it's one of my favorites. Again, our family's on Park Street. I know the bought her own home on Park Street. Always and Park Street has been part of it. And it's just pains me the way it looks. It's really one of our prized possessions. It really is. So I plead with you to consider addressing that.
Thank you. Seeing no one online, we'll move on to the review and discussion portion of our agenda. Up next is Mr. Herbert, Department of Public Works and Admin updates.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to thank, I know Ruth left, but I do want to thank her for the presentation that she delivered. I think she did an excellent job, and there's quite a bit of thought-provoking data there. One thing that I was thinking about, and I see John Moxie's on the call, but maybe, I don't want to speak for John or Fleece and Vanderbrink, but maybe it makes sense to have Fleece and Vanderbrink kind of do the data collection as, we go through different parcels that might be helpful. John and I can talk about that at a later time when I don't put them on the spot in a public meeting. So, but So, we're about 2 weeks away from Labor Day, or so. And so I just want to kind of take a quick look backwards and then maybe, talk about a little bit of what we've got going on moving forwards for this fall. So one of the big things looking back at the summer, I think we've overall had a very successful summer, but one of the main challenges that Public Works faces is the Oval Beach management position. And just to recap a little bit, that's not been an easy position to fill. We had a long time Oval Beach manager for over a decade, and she had resigned. I think it was May of 2021. And since that time, we've gone through 7 managers out at the Oval Beach. There is hope. I think that we're on, we really need to fill that position with somebody who's going to be consistent and be here, for the long term. And I think that I've taken some steps and I've had some conversations with people after posting the job that I think we're on track to do that, but you never really know until you get somebody hired in and see how they work out and make sure they like the position and they're going to stay for a while. The downside of going through that much turnover is there's so much training involved. I mean, that's a critical operation for the city. There's public safety elements to it, food handling elements to it, so on and so forth. It's a pretty key role for us at Public Works. So I just wanted to bring light to that challenge that we face. And go ahead, Nancy.
How come we've had such turnover? What's been the problem?
There's different reasons for each of the 7. One of them is in front of us right now, but there's a lot of reasons for it. I think ultimately, by and large, it's very demanding. I mean, we pay a certain amount of money for the position, but really what they're giving up is their summer. It's holidays, weekends, and you're dealing with, seasonal staff that there's varying degrees of care. How much can somebody who, works seasonally really care about a position? That varies greatly from employee to employee. And so for all those reasons, it's just been difficult. But I think we're making good progress. I'm hopeful going into the 2024 season. We're going to have this, Public Works only has a few positions available, but one of them is this hybrid position between an equipment operator / Oval Beach manager position. So a very unique position. But I've had conversations with somebody, and I plan to offer the job to an individual that we've interviewed, and he did quite well. So hopefully in 2024 we can gain some good traction, and then get to a level of training with this individual to where hopefully we can go beyond that and start getting a little more innovative with our operation out there. That's what I'm looking forward to. So thanks for your question, Nancy. So moving forward.
I'm just
Go
real
ahead.
quick. All that being said, I mean, if it's maybe not the best barometer, but as far as complaints received at Oval Beach compared to my first year, second year, and this year, they've been rather minimal. Probably 1 or 2 complaints compared to 15, 20, 25 my first year here. So, and then Sarah has been helping out with management out there. She's been instrumental. So, although it's difficult, as Scott was explaining, don't sell yourself short. I think you did a great job this year.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Ryan. Thanks a lot.
So what do you
Thank-
attest that to? As far as like changes that you've been able to implement, like what's different now that we're getting less complaints, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure so it's something that's kind of hard in the Public Works realm is like, how do you measure the results? It's kind of arbitrary. So, I think that Sarah was probably the main driver behind it. Sarah was, stepped into a role based off of filling a gap within a small organization. A lot of times we go beyond the scope of our job descriptions, and I attribute this year's success primarily to Sarah. So thank you very much. But,
Agreed.
yeah.
But yeah, Scott's also very instrumental in the interviews. One thing I would mention is that as far as recruitment going into this season, it was a year-long effort, right? So Sarah was like making phone calls midwinter, like, talking to the college students, hey, coming back. So it was a year-long process that was a little more focused on recruitment and retainment. So they did well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Scott, are you going to be here for our meeting with Brightus, or do you need to?
Today?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I plan on
perfect.
being here for the duration of it, yeah.
If not, I was gonna ask you now kind of what your opinion is as far as changes that need to be made to Old Beach in order to have more success with it. That's obviously something that we could improve my 5-year plan, but we
Oh, yeah.
can continue to talk. about
There's a lot of ideas out there, but ultimately, I'm trying to keep kind of my nose to the ground and say, this is where we are currently, and then building off of that. So there's so much potential out there, of course, like it's beautiful. We could go in any number of directions and they're all, there's so many good ideas, but, I need to put, one step at a time and make sure that we have a consistent leadership out at the beach that's going to be here and make sure that everyone's being safe and the organization's being well ran. So, but yeah, no, I'm happy to hear where the conversation leads. So that was kind of a look back at the 2023 season and our biggest challenge moving forward. We're pretty project heavy for this fall, so we get to talk about the fun stuff too, not just the downer stuff, but we're going to get pretty aggressive this year with road construction projects. So in a matter of weeks, we are tearing into Taylor, Tacken, East and West Street, along with North Maple Street. There's a section of road that we're going to be redoing. So I'm very happy to see that work get done. Our roads certainly need it. Mount Baldhead, there's a couple of roofs that will be replaced. I just signed a contract with, or a proposal, I guess I should say, with TNT Roofing. They're going to be doing the roof replacement on the restroom facility as well as the pavilion. And they're going to be doing that this fall. As soon as they're able to, they're going to get in and get that work done. So it was funny when I talked to Art Talsma, the owner. We had a great dialogue, and then it came up to, well, what color shingles do you want? I'm like, oh, that question, just.
What do you want?
So, yeah, so looking forward to that getting done. Let's see, the City Hall exterior, there's still some work to be, it's by and large, the project's done, but there is a couple of details, like the shutters need to get reattached to the building. That's one of them. So I am told that will be completed this week. We'll see. And then also too, kind of an issue that came up was like the rain gutters on the building. So they kind of discharge off to the side of the building over here. Mulch gets covered on the sidewalk. It's been a problem for a really long time. So we're gonna, when we do the exterior work before the project is fully complete, we're not only going to be refurbishing the landscaping, but also, there's some cracked sidewalks out front, the driveway apron. I don't even know if we need a driveway apron in the front of this building. It's not actually a driveway, but that would be changed, and that would certainly take time to work that detail out. But while we have the concrete work torn up, we plan on connecting the rain gutters to the catch basin that's right up front of the building, which is the proper fix. So looking forward to that. Let's see, the Rose Garden fence, that's now that tourism season is winding down officially, after Labor Day, we'll be moving forward with refurbishing the Rose Garden fence, as well as the iron gate on the restroom building. And then maybe a joint project too that I've talked about with the Douglas Public Works Director, Rick Zoet, about having the same company refurbish the street lamps on the Blue Star Highway Bridge. They're kind of rusty, especially where the snow hits the posts consistently with salt. They're kind of rusted out. So looking forward to that. Ace parking lot striping has to do some work. They came in hot and heavy downtown earlier this summer, but then there's still some crosswalks, stop bars, and then the whole west side of the river that still needs to get painted too. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them when they're able to get that work done. And then crack sealing will take place this fall as well. So again, I've talked about it before. I won't bore you with the details, but that's a treatment that we apply to roads that are in fairly good condition and help preserve the life of that road before it deteriorates even more. And then getting the irrigation replaced at Willow Park as well. So that's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening this fall. Looking forward to seeing that progress. And then since the Parks and Public Works Committee kind of absorbed some of the responsibilities of the tree board as well, the former tree board, I do want to just give you one example of something that I work on the sidelines that you don't necessarily have to know or care too much about, but it is an issue. And so I had a resident contact me about a tree that was in poor condition in front of their property. And so I did a site evaluation, which I always do. And when I went out there, I could see a lot of ground cover was planted around the base of the tree. The ground cover grew up the tree and ultimately killed it. Now the resident wants the city to remove the tree and replace it. And I'm willing to do it, but I do want to have a conversation with that resident about maybe, instances where any of the ground covers growing up the trees, it's pretty detrimental to the overall health of it. So reminder to everybody, if you see it, or maybe if you own maybe if there's a city tree on your property that maybe that's not the greatest thing to do. So other than that, that's all I've got unless there's questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Renee, what color do you want?
All right. So we'll move on to study group updates, invasive species.
Invasive species. I got a little help with this, but the Allegheny County Conservation District is working to treat the hemlock trees in Oregon. I don't know if you have all that in front of you, but they're going to treat over 4,000 hemlock trees on 182 acres of city property. They're contracted qualifications, they have to have insurance, they have to have a license, a couple of years of experience, and I'm not sure, did they go up with the proposals?
Yeah, they sure did.
And I guess they've already, they actually have, sorry.
Oh, you got it.
I got it. Okay, yeah. They've agreed to, they've picked out a contractor, it's from Allendale, and they're gonna start working on the tree. I don't actually know parcels, quite a few places. They're doing mouth all that too.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a map attached to this as part of the presentation from the Conservation District. That's gonna be page 25.
Do we actually have the woolly, what you call it, or are we just preventing it?
No, we have the
Have them.
hemlock woolly adelgid.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah.
It's not an awesome map, but it's a good. It's basically on the west side.
It is a heat map.
Heat map?
Oh, yeah, there it is. I was looking at.
Well, if I can add a few more things, sir.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your work on this, by the way. You did a great job. Thank you. So the Allegan Conservation District has also been working with private landowners in the same area. So there's dual efforts going on with that. The city did budget the amount as far as the low bid from GEI. So it's going to be on the council agenda on Monday for action. And so this has been a longstanding issue, and that the city council has supported working on this.
Mr. Manager, where does the Douglas and Township lie in this? I knew that there was a big thing as far as us doing that together, or it was gonna be
Yeah, that's a good
less
question.
effective.
I don't know the answer. Let me look into that.
Well, that was the $44,000
Question.
bid, and then also, it sounds like they have to redo it every 5 years. So we have to stay on top of that. I know that
Budget what?
with the ash borer, we saved a tree for about 3 years, then forgot to do it and it was gone, so.
Yeah. Yep, there is a recurring cost, that's for sure. They're very clear about this during their presentation to council. And so, yeah, that's something that we have to remember to budget going forward.
And I think that's where my question was coming from too. I remember that being like, we can do that, but we need the help of our local municipalities also, because otherwise we're kind of
Right.
not prepared.
Also, Kelly instigated this, but I walked up to Mount Baldhead with her and John Vanderbeek, and we were scraping, and we were earmarking regional.
Bittersweet. Yeah.
Asian bitters.
Yeah.
Lots of bitters. So we walked up, we spray painted the leaves and some plantlets, and you're going to walk up there with some.
Yeah. Okay.
So, there is a new fundraiser at the middle school this year, so it's called the Servathon. So each grade will be giving back to the community. The eighth graders right now we're working on, having them work on invasives, Mount Baldhead. So we've worked with John from Rover Council, we've talked to Scott with DPW. I'll be connecting with the Allegan Conservation District on that as well. And so what we've done so far is just talked with administration at the school and then, walk the trails to identify how this would actually work with that many, with about 60 eighth graders that would be involved in this. What we realized in doing this as well is there's a ton of trash that needs to be picked up this season, so that's also an activity that the, kids would be able to do. You know, we kind of identified some easier trails, to manage and some younger vines that could be just, manually taken out. So there would be no oversized pesticides or anything involved in that. And so we going the formal route of talking to Allegan Conservation just to make sure that they are on board and approving this. And then I do have a tentative date and I would love to share that with you guys once we get it formalized. I'd love if you're available. And I should say it's for 1 hour. So essentially what's really cool is that we will be doing some sort of curriculum on invasives for the science teachers for the eighth graders. Go over, we'll be at the pavilion. So we'll be talking to eighth graders there and then disperse into our groups for picking up garbage and doing this. So once this is completely pulled together, then I will send it out to you guys because I would love for you to be a part of this as well.
Thanks for doing it.
So we're excited. We just have to formalize it. So. I know. Nothing was done with her, and I did, outline as it's speaking. And the goodness is, it's still an important. Sorry. And unfortunately, a lot are being wiped out by the deer too, so there's some secondary issues there, but yes, we just walked that path and there are some beautiful seedlings coming up, so thank you for that. Yeah, wonderful, okay, we'll keep that in mind.
You know, in
Okay.
relation to what you're saying, I just started looking into, there's I know it's bizarre, but Weyerhaeuser has a system that they use on the West Coast for their hillside, mountainside forests. They actually use a machine gun type seedling planting machine where and they do it for Halifax. But they have a device where they. No, but my point is, they put so many in and through attrition, a lot of them do get eaten, but a lot of them take off. And there's ways to do it so that we don't have to theoretically. Because I've walked up there with Boy Scouts about 6 years ago too, and we planted, 1,000 vines, and they were all awesome. But I'm looking into that. Machine gun seed.
Anything else on invasive species?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
not to belabor the invasive species conversation, but speaking of, yeah, but, speaking of deer, so there's been a number of environmental groups and homeowners who have been asking about what they call like a deer culling or thinning of the herd program in the city of Saugatuck. I think the city's looked into it, but for whatever reason had not pursued it. Recently, I've had a private landowner in the Goon Ridge area that owns quite a bit of property reach out to me to talk about thinning the deer herd. And I reached out to the Department of Natural Resources and said like, hey, can these people actually just use archery to hunt on their private property? They said, yeah, unless there's a city ordinance that is against it, they have to follow certain rules as far as like where they can shoot a deer, as far as the lot line setback, the Department of Natural Resources has their whole thing. And so that is something that I said that I'd be looking into and possibly work with them. So it's going to be something that's going to go in front of the city council. The council does have a policy that restricts without a permit, although we don't have an official permit, hunting with archery within city limits. So it's something that the city would have
Okay,
to sign
so
off on.
speaking as a resident west of the river and knowing that the city of Saugatuck is 1.39 square miles, I personally am opposed to anybody shooting a crossbow on my side of the river. So, I mean, we can talk about it at council, but that's insane. So, but yes, okay. Look, no one's more upset about the deer than me. They eat everything we put out there. I understand. I also understand that we kind of live in their house. Also, this is a Michigan problem. I have friends in Troy who have problems with deer in their backyards, right? But to me, the vegan, it sounds insane that you would hunt a deer on your property in the city limits. I know, it's a whole, I mean, I think, again, us doing something without Douglas and the township doing something, we are this big and we are surrounded by Douglas in the township. Us doing something about the deer, and again, I live west of the river, like I'm most impacted, I fully sympathetic to the problems that we're having over there. Absolutely. I'm just not sure that the answer is to kill them in our backyard when the backyards are this big, yeah.
I've thought about this, you can actually walk through private land, but through a forest, all the way from the river mouth, all the way into the township south of Douglas. Through forests and stuff, so there's actually a pathway for deer that go all the way up, all the way back through the
Take
forest.
them all the way down to the washout and beyond, yeah.
If you, start calling deer, it's a never ending.
No.
I look forward to the council discussion.
So do I. I do, exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Jared.
Okay, so let's move on. So airport property, and the other thing is we do need to move along because we do need to have our focus group conversation. And I know that we can't go more than 3 hours. So we have to wrap up by 12:30 per charter guidelines. So I'm just gonna try to keep things moving. Airport property, everybody has the ecological and sustainability evaluations that were provided by ODC. I'm very excited about those. I'm sorry, is it okay?
Go ahead,
If I could,
please.
so, the update is there for you. The thing that I was not the thing. So one thing that I'm probably happiest about is it looks like there's nothing to stop us from, grooming the already, established trails and just giving us some little more legitimacy to those trails. So that's exciting for me. I was a little bit disappointed to see that there's not really an opportunity to do solar. But that's okay because it opens us up for other things that we can possibly do with those areas. We do have, I see, we have an optional planning session that I know that we paid for with the ODC. So I would like to set that up and that we can contact them hopefully and get something squared away where I would like to talk about next steps then.
Yes.
On our trails and what that looks like. And I mean, so unless there's any objections. we can-
That's great. So that's gonna be the strengths, opportunities, aspiration, results, and whiteboard session. So would you like to have it at this normally scheduled meeting? Would that be easiest for everyone?
I think so. And I think it makes sense to have it
Then
transparent.
we'll invite the
Does that make
public.
sense? Yeah. I can't think of any reason why we wouldn't do
Great.
it that way.
Great.
But yeah, I would say our next steps, we should contact them and get that set up and really then start making the next move to get those trails legitimized. And, that could be really exciting stuff. So something to put out feather in our cap. So anyway, that's all I have on that. Blue Star,
Well, I'm happy to say that the last several meetings, you've heard me complain. that Nothing's been happening and actually something's happened. So you saw in your packet that, we started to get materials from C2AE. We had our project kickoff meeting August 8th. And that includes basically everybody who was on the tri-community committee, whatever that, I don't remember the exact title, but so we have representatives from Saugatuck Township, Douglas, the city, the Friends of the Blue Star Trail. And that was a Zoom meeting, that went very well. And basically, just to cut to the chase though, that's the good news. The bad news is, that the timeline is so long that, we're actually not scheduled to start construction until, probably spring of 2025. And this is of course only 2023. So, so basically that gives us like 16 months or more, to prepare. And there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. So we will be working on all of the actual, fine tuning the design of the path, in terms, so they can start to let the bids, in January of 2025. So, but that's probably enough.
wonderful. Yeah.
So you feel positive?
I feel like it's just, you know, it's very slow. Oh, I had one other thing.
And we're
to
meeting
say.
again Thursday, right?
Right. Well, are we?
I think so.
I'm still waiting for that to get nailed down, but anyway, yeah, we're gonna have a little, you know, just with Saugatuck City, people, you know, talking about some of our anticipated controversial aspects of the project.
Mhm.
So, I just thought. And, oh, but the Friends of the Blue Star, Trail had, you know, we had our gala, I told you about that, did very well, $1,000. So we're putting money aside for, you know, adding the next, you know, portions of the trail. We are also in need of, new and fresh board members. So if anyone has any interest or knows anyone or even has an idea of someone I could lobby, I would appreciate that.
Wonderful, thank you. Glenna and Kelly, Village Square and Playground updates? We have slides.
We have slides.
I know, you're gonna love Glenna's slides. in particular. He's a wizard.
slides? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned last time that we have been working really hard this summer to try and make sure that we can move forward with this because of the inspection that we had received in the spring. So to start off, recap, you guys obviously know Village Square, centerpiece of downtown, beloved by both locals and tourists. One thing I want to point out from this slide is we had questions on what we were going to do about the memorial piece that's in the very front. And that will stay intact. We have no intentions of moving that, so I want to make sure that's clear. So move to the next slide, please. And then, we spoke, you know, I think 2 meetings back about ODC inspection that happened. There were many priority 1 and priority 2 safety concerns, non-compliant, they need to be corrected. Unfortunately, Scott's group was able to look at, you know, what the cost would be. It's pretty exorbitant in terms of just correcting what's there. And so really what we need to do is be able to move forward with it, decommission it potentially this fall, if we can get through the timeline that we'll speak to in a few slides. And then move forward with replacements so that we're not spending money that we know ultimately will then have to be replaced, regardless. And one of the things I want to point out is that in going back and reading 5-year Parks Plan again, is this has been a priority for a while. So this was already listed with the last group that did this, that they were aware that this was past its useful life and that this was a priority to move forward with and change. They also had set a potential budget aside back in 2018 for this to move forward. So I want to make sure that that's noted. Next slide. I'm going to have to do this.
We haven't been
We're
doing
here
a
to
tag.
support, guys.
team. We have just, last time we talked about this, we talked about moving it over where the basketball court is. So it was closer to the restrooms and it had that nice hill there. Well, because of the timeline, and if we decommission this now, we want to have a playground next summer, and we thought that getting that approved across the street would take a while. In addition to the pushback that we've received about that, we decided to keep it in the current location. But maximizing the existing footprint. So if you look at where the actual cutout is for the playground area itself, it has that weird pointy thing at the top. And there's just grass around it. So we could extend that area a little bit without cutting down any trees or anything. That's a priority for us to keep folks there. Currently, the age range doesn't really go down to 2 to 5. So we want to include a 2 to 5 little area within there. We want to include some unique and modern features. There, you know, these aren't the playgrounds of our youth. There's many new cool things. They have roller slides that we've asked for.
A lot of ropes and a lot of verticality so that there's more physical play going on. So that's one thing that we want to make sure people are aware of, is that we might be going up a little bit, nothing absurd, but what other playgrounds, existing playgrounds in the area are doing.
And net climbers, these are very popular with the kids now, and little spinners. So they're not our old merry-go-rounds. They're cooler than that and safer. So you don't spin it, you know, and everybody goes flying up. And zip lines, things like that. So we've been looking at all of those. We want to use long-lasting materials. I think Kelly mentioned when I was here last time that we are pursuing themes. So we really like the nature theme with wood look and things like that. And we can show you some of the things we found related to that, but that gets expensive. Or the same with art and music themes as being our coast. You know, you can put really cool musical things in there, but they cost money. So we'll have to decide, is that important to us? And can we afford it or find the money for it? We did say that we had a compromise, that if we still are across from the restrooms, we want to add a solar flashing crosswalk sign so people can safely cross to get over to the restrooms. Next slide, please. So we did, with that in mind, started meeting with some vendors and designers, and we put together this little trifold that everybody should have in front of them, that we shared with anybody we met with. You know, originally on the inside, that's when we were still talking about moving it to C. But we pretty much switched her idea on that and leave it where it is. So these were things that we wanted to emphasize. We did find that if you use wooden and timber structures, because ODC was the first group that we talked with, really liked the guy. They're kind of two downsides. They're not available to even do anything until 2025. And they do use real wood structures, but they deteriorate. And it's going to be a problem for maintenance, not only for DPW, but also we were going to have to replace it a lot sooner. So it's better to invest more upfront in things that look like wood, but aren't wood. Cement composites. So we did meet with them, had some follow-ups with them, and they ended up doing the playground inspection then that same day, actually. Found another company, Adventure World, that we were excited about for a while and had some nice structures. But as we investigated it, they are non-compliant with a lot of the things that like ODC used on their checklist. One of them being that they don't bury the posts. And the structure just kind of sits there. So I don't think we could move ahead with them just for liability purposes. And the next two, Sinclair, they use Game Time and Playcore equipment. They're located in Holland, which is nice. And they've worked with Douglas on their parks projects.
So both Schultz and Beery Field are examples of their structures.
And then another company that we've been working with is Ventura, and they use landscape structures. I think we both kind of personally like the look of those a little better, but you know, we're waiting with renderings and quotes, and we're gonna talk about that in a minute. They're based out of Brighton, but it was no problem. Carl, their rep, came over, met with them, and they worked with West Ottawa School District, and they redid how many of their playgrounds at elementary schools?
So you guys, I went to 7 playgrounds in one afternoon with 2 very excited boys. So they got a massive contract with West Ottawa Schools. They redid every playground at school, and they kept what was intact from prior playgrounds, and then they built massive structures, and they did, I mean, cool things that people put up there. Those are all custom done playgrounds where they have Big Red, so the lighthouse. They have a woody ship that's ADA compliant that you can put your wheelchair on, and then it rocks. They have a steamship and all kinds of crazy stuff. They have a nature-based one. What's that? All of this. So anyway, it was super interesting and helpful to go and see. And it's just, I mean, like Glenna was saying, a lot of the rope structures and more vertically inclined, all of these were at elementary schools. So, you know, your ages are 5 and up. So that's why we still want to do something for the littler kids, but it was really great to see all that they've done, and the work is great. So
This is landscape structures.
Yep.
So not only visiting, but we've looked at a lot of catalogs. We've met with these people. We looked at their online components, and we have gotten some renderings and initial quotes. We weren't real thrilled with exactly what they gave us. I think there's something lost in translation when you talk to the salesperson, that they send it to a designer. And then there's a lot lost in that translation. So a lot doesn't get in there that you've asked for, even though you may have put it in writing in an email. So, yeah. Yes. So we are now on round 2, but we do have 2 designs from each of those companies that we want to show you next.
Okay, So this first one is through, Sinclair, so out of Holland. So what's cool about this is we wanted the boundaries of the playground really used a little bit more wisely. So the structure's more vertical, we have more play structures further out from the main structure, which I think is cool, which we don't have right now. They're keeping the swings because we feel like there would be anarchy if we remove swings from an existing structure. The other thing that both companies have advised us on is since there's already a ramp coming up from Butler Street, they advised us on keeping that. And also that, one thing we haven't mentioned is we're trying to be as ADA and universally compliant as possible. So we want to have aspects on both the main structure and the secondary structures around it so that those, and people can engage with this as well. So cost is obviously very important. We're looking at $332,000. However, there is a grant that we can apply for through them that goes through October 27th. So that's something that we do have partially filled out at this point, and there's no harm in filling it out, even if we don't go with them. That's something that we definitely move forward with. Okay, so now we'll move to the next one. But that's a little bit closer up, so you can see some of the features there. So nature-based, and again, you guys don't take these totally as is because we've already kind of done another round with this. Okay, Sarah, if you want to click it forward one more time. And so then this is, we basically asked them to do two. I know they're looking at the cost. So you guys, this one is if we
Look
put
down.
in. Well, okay, let me just.
Bigger.
Okay, before this goes anywhere, this will not be the cost. This is not this high. But what we did want to do is we wanted to look at these concrete resin structures. So that's about is like, actually, if you click forward one more, Sarah, if you don't mind. So you can see it on the left-hand side there. This rendering does not do it any justice. It's actually right here on it. I'll show it. They're so cool. And so what we wanted to do is just see what the possibility was. I've already asked him to exchange those out because they are price prohibitive, but we wanted to see if we included those in what our money could get us. So they're expensive and there's multiple. So you can see it on the left and right hand side. So there was a smaller 2 to 5 structure that's like that. Again, it would be way cooler. It's Disney-esque. I mean, it's very.
Can
fun.
that be added to? Like if we went with a smaller one, like the next year.
Sure, we could phase it. We could phase. And that's something we need to talk about too. So anyway, there's a list this long of things that have gone back to our rep for of changes for this, including swapping out those. And so I expect to see that number come down quite a bit. But I also don't want to mislead you in the fact that their prices have gone up significantly since COVID. We're in a different place than the last time the 5-year plan was done. It was about $175,000 that was set aside for redoing Village Square Playground as of 2018. A different time frame. So it is what it is.
And you can also tell from the footprint between option 3 and 4, 3 is really smaller than what we have there now. And, you know, I'm not sure that people will, once we change it, go, why did you go to something that's less? I really like, you know, these options. We can, with possible grants, get that down to closer to 500, I think it was.
So.
And we're gonna
working
talk,
on
we're
it.
gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
So Douglas is all public donation. I mean, I'm actually going to their fundraiser tonight.
How much can I ask, how much they raised?
So she has raised $217,000 as of right now. And that is what you see at both Beery and Schultz Park. And the second phase is for the older age group. And then it's also for an adult workout area. And she has another 200 to go. So all in all, and her numbers have changed significantly where her original quotes, because she's had to raise these funds over time, it just continues to go like this. So what she originally budgeted for is an entirely different space than what she's in now. So that's been painful. But anyway, there's basically kind of all of the different types of things you want in a playground. So you want spinning, swinging, climbing, all of the motor skills. It's all there. I mean, they make sure of that, and we've gone through that with them. So I expect to get next iteration on this version, which will be less expensive because again, those concrete resin ones will be out by the end of the week. So we're looking at that for the 25th. Okay. Forward.
And we also do have potential, I mean, the city's gonna have to kick in some with their budget, but we already have some people we've been talking to, which we're not gonna mention who that is.
Nothing's firm.
Nothing firm at all, but you know,
interest.
there's some interest out there. And we also have some other ideas for structures we can put in that might prompt donations from some businesses. Yeah. Again, we can't talk about that yet, but this is the second company, Ventura out of Brighton. This was their option one. I like, again, see, there's already looks just more kind of nature based, but you can see what a small footprint it actually takes up of the playground footprint itself.
Yeah, you see it squared off there.
This one, and you know, we're still working on getting full quotes. The other one included installation, freight. This one does not. This is the equipment only, but it's hard getting this from them, but we will eventually get it. If you could go to the next slide, please. That's a little bit different rendering of what that looks like. I don't personally like all those just straight walkways, on there. We can have activity things going on. So that's one thing that I've asked for with this company is have more rope, sway bridge kind of things in between there and, other things like that. If you go to the next one, that's their option two, which is, again, their more expensive one. Takes up a little bit more space. You do have to leave areas around the swing set, but as much area as there was on the prior one, we didn't need that much. So we could fill that up. So they have a concept, something called flow play, free flow play. So instead of just, you know, this traditional thing, you can have, like a zip monkey bars coming out. And on one way have zip lines going out, another way have rope climbers. So all that open space kind of on the bottom left could be filled up with those kind of structures, which would add a lot more play area to it. We also did not see in there's the 2 to 5 play areas, so I talked to them about adding that. And I talked to them, this company actually has some really cool also natural elements like this tree slide, and they also have something called a mother tree, and which they didn't incorporate, and we're not quite sure why. Again, that was that lost in translation. So he's redoing that. What actually happened last week is I got to talk to the designer straight to him. So we had a really nice Zoom meeting and talked about the components. He showed me other ones they've done. They have more structures available than what actually appear in their catalogs. So that was really helpful. He was supposed to have me something by Friday. I didn't see it. Didn't see it yesterday, so I texted him this morning, and I saw that he sent me something in the email at 9:30. So but it includes a lot more of these, you know, nature elements. So before we discount that, I really, really think that we could have something pretty special down there. That would be a tourist destination for us. It's gonna be more expensive, but people are gonna have to get used to the sticker shop. But if we can go for the higher value, we're gonna have more area filled in. We're gonna have nicer nature structures. And like we said, we have possibilities that could supplement the budget from the city. So if anybody has any ideas or if they want to do it, I
think you should go for it because I mean, you know,
We spent the time.
in a big way.
Now
I
it's
mean,
like-
that makes it fabulous because, you know, obviously it is obviously just gonna be appreciated by the locals, but it's gonna be interesting too.
Yeah.
And so I hear constantly, you know, everything we want to do, you know, to encourage our economics and that'll add to it. And this town has generous people. And I think if we really went out there and, you know, I think we could probably already, you know, got the leads on that, from what I can hear. I just think so, we're, you know,
I agree. So
Before we wrap up, the other thing too is that, they did a community build for both Erie and for Shoals Park. And we would hope to do that, and that could also save money, significant funds actually. But also be a great way to involve the community and have everybody feel like they're a part of this. And I did that for Shelton. It was really, yeah. You go out and you put all the nuts and bolts together. They have their engineers there. You create like a clear line with it, and then you're actually like putting things in the concrete. It's actually really fun.
Yeah.
And just everybody then feels like they got their skin in the game. So, yeah. And then next slide, please, Sarah. So this is our timeline, you guys. So today we're presenting to you. We'd love for you to kind of mull this over and give us, your thoughts. Yeah, yeah, just shoot us emails.
Great slide.
Shoot us emails. And then, we're hoping to receive updates on our renderings based on, our feedback to the vendors. We're thinking that we're probably gonna have to do a special meeting to decide on this because we've got to get this moving forward if we have the goal of decommissioning the current playground by the fall. We need to get orders in by late fall, so October, November timeframe. Also, we know that the Game Time grant that I spoke of earlier, the deadline for that is October 27th. So that means it needs to go to council and be put on agenda prior to that. And then they would require a deposit down at the same time as the grant finalization. And that's if we choose that particular vendor. And then the goal would be, April to do the community build.
Are there other grants or is it kind of?
A lot of that. So there is a grant that we could do, that is, words for that. Not matching, but it basically has to be funded by the public. And it can't be tens and $15,000. It has to be small amounts.
That's the MEDC one.
Yep. So that one, so Anna Gregg was advising me on that one, who's done the Douglas Park project. That you can do up to $50,000. We absolutely would take part in that one. And you don't have to do to any denomination. It's just whatever's raised, right? So that one will work fine. But a lot of them, we are missing out on some of the ADA compliance stuff. And so right now, as you look at these renderings, we're gonna go with a wood chip base. We haven't even asked for, any quotes on doing the, what's it called, like the recycled base. Those are incredibly expensive. And we could do portions of it, but I saw those done actually at West Ottawa schools where you have a portion that would be for wheelchairs and such to get through. But those get covered by the wood chips and it becomes a maintenance thing. And so really what we thought to do, because unfortunately we are on a timeline to do this because of the inspections, we will do much more, we'll make much more readily available to ADA compliance than what is existing. And then we have these outer portions of it that those people can reach, but we can't do everything we want. It's also expensive, so it's both the fiscal aspect and our timeline. But we would have so much more that's inclusive than what exists today.
But that does prevent us from getting some grant.
But the MEDC grant, you can move on forward on, and you set your amount of what you want to raise in the community. So if you say 25,000, you have to raise 25,000. But if you do, MEDC matches it with 25,000, so you have 50. So we could say 50, potentially be 100,000, but then we have to be sure from our small community, we could raise 50,000. And it can't just be one person giving 50 or 25,000. It has to be 10,000 minimum each, or I can't remember.
I think 10,000 was the max that you could, that's what Anna had said. So I would have to go back to
From one
confirm that.
person?
Yeah, because they want it to be.
So we'd want to be sure that we have those people lined up before we do it, so we know what amount we can raise and then get the grant.
Does it have to be people just from Saugatuck City, or could we host a fundraiser and, so it doesn't have to be just people that are literally in the community?
I have a question, Mr. Manager. So I know that there's been discussion of this. Obviously, they talked about the last 5-year Parks and Rec plan. Are funds specifically earmarked? There was a budget in there. It was $175,000, I want to say. Are those funds specifically earmarked for a playground? And so we would just have to go and get the delta from council?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Oh, good to know. All right.
And we still have the Mount Baldhead match too, right, at 500,000?
That's still in the budget. So.
In addition to the 175 that's earmarked.
No. Playground versus.
Is this specific to one contract? This timeline?
No, this is specific to if we expect to decommission existing and have a spring build. It's basically the timeline as far as ordering and getting things in on the time for a spring build. That's how long it takes.
Our strong recommendation is decommissioning it.
Either one. Either one. That's what we've been advised by either vendor.
All right, excellent. Park Street and Mount Baldhead improvements, we do not have Member Johnson for Park Street. Do we have anything for AT&T and Mount Baldhead at this point? Yeah, where we were.
Yeah, certainly. AT&T, they're hanging tough, with us, dealing with multiple stakeholders. As it stands now, we are working with the Historical Society to try to make accommodations with inside the radome to leave their giant antenna intact
Inside?
inside the radome. So AT&T's been, like I said, very patient with us. We've been working with their engineers. At this point, we feel like there's a way to work with the Historical Society to allow that antenna to stay in place in the radome. So we're moving forward. A couple more steps with that. We have to go through the zoning board of appeals for some setback issues, sort of following our city ordinances as all should. And so that's the step we have to go through. But other than that, they've already made investments in getting fiber out there, so they're ready to go with that. And so they're still hoping to have this installed, talking about AT&T wireless inside the radome, for summer season of next year.
In the bathrooms, obviously we know that the footprint is gonna have to maintain where it is. Is there any
Exactly. Yeah, so
thought still about upgrading those bathrooms that we?
no, I don't think AT&T has any interest in that at this point. So we're gonna have to work on that as a group to renovate those restrooms. And yeah, we will want to try to stay inside that existing footprint, given the archaeological survey that we received through the AT&T project. So I don't think we want to disturb any other soil in that area. So I had a meeting with Consumers Energy yesterday, and they let me know of a project which is pretty significant. They said, and I'll fact check this, but they said they're gonna bury all the utilities on Park Street. So everything's gonna go underground.
And
Consumer. Yep, because they're driving the project.
what's the timeline for something like that?
So I'll get you the details, but this is, yeah, some pretty hot new
That's
information.
excellent, yeah.
That's what I told them. Excellent, especially as we start to look at
Before we
Park
get to
Street.
the road,
White
yeah.
Road.
Great time. I worried about.
I think they have so many issues with the trees and the sand, like to stabilize those poles, like if you drive down there, like some of those are diligent, listing very heavily, leaning. And I think it's just too difficult for them to get their footings in there, so they're just making a cost analysis.
If you just live on that side of the river, I mean, all you need is a good wind and we're losing power. I mean, there's
Yeah.
really mature trees and really old lines and it's not a great combination. Yeah, there's when we lose power, Wi-Fi, all that stuff.
So I'll get more details. But
That's excellent. news. I have-
that's a big deal.
Okay.
And I said, well, just go around the whole city. You don't have to stop on Park Street.
Just, let's just start with Park Street. That's great. Okay.
So that's gonna be a big deal. I'll get you more deets
Outstanding.
on that. And then on the agenda for the council is the donation box that Miss Zeta and Mr. Curb placed at the steps at Mount Baldhead. And so what I've asked from them is to just have a clear understanding on like who's collecting money and where does the money go? Just kind of a process management question. I think a donation box there is a great idea. They've informed me that the Historical Society will collect the funds and then everything goes to the city for Mount Baldhead infrastructure steps, like some of the issues that they had pointed out earlier today. Said, okay, that's cool. We just need to get that in writing basically in front of our council. Just so we know where the money's going, right? If you're collecting it, does it go to the Historical Society, half and half? I mean, there's lots of not-for-profits that would love to put out donation boxes in different areas. So I just want to make sure that we have a good handle on the management of funds.
What is that, 65 now?
You know what? I mean, I would venture to say they would probably make $100 a week. If I had to guess. Yeah, they've already collected over 100, and it's been out for maybe a couple weeks. There you go. No, I think it would be successful. They also want to put a QR code up, so I've requested new signage, better signage. They're going to put a QR code on it for larger donors because not a lot of people carry cash. So
A little Venmo. Yeah, exactly.
Can we get a sign up on Mount Baldhead?
Well, yeah, like a Leave No Trace. I'd be willing to contact Leave No Trace and see if we could have something from them.
When we were walking.
Oh, it's terrible. The stuff, tons of broken bottles, tons of.
I feel like the people that are willing to do something like that, there are enough people that are willing to look at signs. No one goes, oh my gosh, I was gonna whip this over the side of the edge, but now I see there's a sign.
Right, but it's a lot of kids and.
Yeah, it's
From
nasty.
early.
And Leave No Trace is a positive message with that. I can say.
Yeah.
All right,
Don't dump your trash or
Yeah.
take it with you.
Leave only footprints, take only pictures, yeah.
I'll let you know when you're ready.
So we good to move on to recycle bins? That should be the last thing before we
Yeah,
get to our
sorry.
master plan update.
so-
Yes.
There, I think that's flat. Okay, so, we'll make this real quick. So Ellen, Scott, well, it was mentioned at the meeting, right? We talked about recycling bins and trying to integrate them in our commercial spaces, our public spaces. So I did some research and got some quotes after talking with Scott. Scott was fantastic in giving feedback. So one of the things is, you know, he obviously operates with a small crew, so we need to make sure this isn't gonna be more work for them. So he had suggested 55-gallon bins, so they don't have to do this every hour. And so we obviously wanted to match, and so we did 55-gallon, recycling bins. I did some research into what is the best behavior or habit creator. And it's these restrictive openings because we'll only be starting with bottles and cans and, to hopefully have less contamination. And we can actually do labeling down the side of what it is. Same thing for waste. We also like the, hinged top on the garbage just because we have a lot of dogs and food and things that get put in there on hot days. And so we want to make sure to keep the smell down. We wanted to have these matching, and then these are made in the US and they are made from 100% recyclable materials. So it's made from milk jugs. So we thought that's a great narrative too, as far as what we're trying to accomplish here. So what we're looking at here is for 3 sets, so 3 of each. It's around, what is that, $6,600 to do. 6 cans. They're not cheap, but they are durable, and that's the other thing that we need to make sure of. And so what I would like to propose to the group after talking with Scott is we'd like to do a pilot of putting these in 3 different places. Scott had proposed doing it at, Saugatuck Drug Corner, at Village Square, and then over at the hall. So that we're in 3 very highly trafficked places. And then this is our, you know, initial outlay, and we'll do a test and then get feedback from DPW. He's also gonna have to get, a dumpster because we're gonna be collecting materials that we haven't collected before, and train staff. So we'll see, but we're hoping it actually keeps the garbage down because we're moving some of the materials and putting it where it belongs. So, that's that, and I'd like to take a vote is what we want to do, is what we want to move forward
And that
with.
quote expires in a month.
What about,
I mean, I can go back to them, and we did get a certain percentage off.
which part?
Well, here, I'll let,
I mean, I would
very good.
say let's have a board, which part is.
It's a test, so it's like, how much do we want to invest initially? to
Are
see
you,
if this is
is
something
that
DPW
cool with you, or you want to just do the test on 3?
Yeah, I'm a fan of starting slow with this, just because there, you know, as I learn more about it, I think everyone's on the same page. We all want recycling. We want to handle this material responsibly as best we can. You know, but I talked to I'm really good friends still with the former Public Works Superintendent, Bruce Simonson, and he kind of highlighted some issues with the way that, you know, for example, when I first started at Public Works, the full-time guys, they moved most of the trash receptacles over to the Wicks Park parking lot. And it's like, well, what was the reason for that? It's because our snow plowing equipment's brutal on this stuff. You know, the snow coming off the plow. That's why we have an ordinance in place about removing benches and stuff like that along our sidewalks after, I think, November it is. So, you know, a big part of it is just, you know, $6,600 is no joke for 6 receptacles. So I think starting slow, making sure that this is commercial grade quality stuff that we're purchasing, and just really taking our time and making sure that the investment is wise and it's going to hold up to those guys up at DPW.
Why would
It's
we
so
need a
rough.
separate waste can? Like, why wouldn't we use our regular waste cans and then just buy recycle cans?
We could, but I think part of the idea here is the kind of the training element with people as well, and like the educational piece to it. And you know, one, it just overall it looks a lot nicer in my opinion,
Patches,
which is
yeah, I get it.
debatable.
I mean, the other thing is that I don't know how many you have, but he has some mix and match ones that are, some are 55 gallon and some are the smaller. The smaller ones for his crews, he has to continue to have guys show up because they get overstuffed. So if we move forward with this, and that honestly is why these are more expensive, because these are custom 55 gallon, because they come smaller, for traditional use. So, that hopefully is gonna help minimize the staff needing to be downtown more often. So, yeah, we're looking at the educational piece, because like the blue compared to the aggregate that we
Oh,
have right
yeah.
now, the aggregate blends in, and it's nice. This is gonna stand out. It's gonna stand out for a reason, because we're doing something different, right?
As far, to your point though, Keith, I think, you know, as far as the specific, I just threw some locations out. I'm not, you know, just food for thought. Those were my recommendations. We could put them anywhere just to the pilot program, but you know, drugstore is pretty centrally located within the business district. Village Square is just an attraction. And then, you know, Park Street, Mount Olivet is, there's probably a lot of recycling that can be done over at Mount Olivet, I would guess.
Yeah.
So,
And this is going to be this season.
The hope is for this fall. I mean, that's what I'm asking is,
I'd be willing to bring this to a vote if, to take it to council. There's an appetite, so let me, would you like to make a motion to?
I move that we, do this pilot project and purchase the new in speech for this fall.
All in favor? Oh, please, yes, motion's on the table.
My only question really is, I think it's great. If we really, this is a pilot, if we thought about what would it take to actually be fully done and how much money would we?
yep. So that is 35 units for Scott, and that is we get a deeper discount for doing that, and that is at a cost of $71,166.
31 pairs.
that's just for downtown,
Got it.
correct?
35%.
For
That is
70 units, okay.
Yeah.
Do we think that would be?
No, not 35 pairs. 35 pairs. Yeah, 35.
A pair of
Yep.
70.
Yep.
That would be a
Just-
lot. I'm sorry.
Just for downtown, right? That's 35 downtown. And we have what, another 20 or 25 units at Oval Beach?
Well, I didn't include Oval Beach for this. I did. So,
So that would be
Yeah.
something to contend with too. I do have a call, just to add to the discussion, I do have a call into Jack Brown from Republic Service just to kind of get a quote for, you know, if we only have three recycle bins downtown, we're not gonna need a very big receptacle at Public Works. But, you know, multiplied by the whole city, we're gonna have to get so I'll get a quote
Investment.
and be able to give that information as well.
You've got 70 odd receptacles
Well-
recycling. They're gonna be recycling a lot of stuff. If you can get
That was some of the concern, you know, Bruce, in full disclosure, he was like, you're nuts for trying to go for this because it's gonna be, you're gonna be basically, your crew is gonna be picking through garbage and filtering through this, but you know, that was his experience and that was some time ago, or I don't think that the culture in society was very supportive of this kind of mission, but I think all we can do is maybe give it a shot and see how it goes. And that's,
that was our conversation, start small and see what the contamination rate is, and that's why we're going with this particular unit. I will say from a research perspective, I looked at what everybody has in the local area. I talked at length with Grand Rapids and their sort program. I asked them for vendors that we've used before. This particular vendor is who Keep America Beautiful has done their grant system through. The grant system's on a hold right now since COVID. We can look into that if we're gonna go for all the units and try and find grants to go through for this. So we haven't looked at that yet. So, yeah, I mean, that's where we're at with these ones in particular, the size and also the specs of them. That's why we're at the cost. We did look at other things. I looked at other companies and I looked at what other areas are using. And we like to start, because the other thing is rain is not getting in. So if you have it where it's top down, you get water in there, and that's even more for history to deal with. So we are paying that for in part because we want to be successful in this aspect of that.
And in my opinion, we can't sit here and talk about sustainability and all that without talking about recycling, and it's not gonna be free. But this is the way that, to my mind, that we move forward in a sincere way. Right, with protecting
And
our waterways, with respecting the earth that we're entrusted with. I don't think that it's gonna be free.
And I want to thank Scott for being aligned with this because this is more work for his crew and he's not getting the free food this way. So he's
there's always skepticism, and I don't mean to be negative, but I always kind of think, you know, how is this gonna backfire on me and my staff? So just kind of
It's legit.
creeping into it and seeing what it really means for us. So, thank you.
Well, when you present this to council, will you be presenting it with, that obviously having three faculty is good for a pilot, but in the long run, it's not worth it. So we're only gonna be doing the pilot with the intention of the change, right?
Yeah, with the feedback from DPW.
Yeah, it would be, you know, things.
Figure the 10 cent cans.
Okay, are we ready to call the question? Okay, all in favor? I was asking if we're ready to call the question. Are we ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. And opposed, motion carries. We'll take it to council. Good work. Okay, with that, we have tabled the Canary in the Coal Mine conversation, and we are on to Tri-Community Parks and Recreation. And neither of you had a birthday since you started, did you? Sorry.
Morning. How you guys doing
Morning.
today? Isn't it amazing how much playground equipment costs?
Yeah.
Always blows my mind when I see that those quotes come in.
Wish it was
I feel like I
different.
should be in that business. So my name is John. I'm joined here with my colleague Andy, and we are with Beers Design Group. We're landscape architects, and we're helping spearhead the update to the rec plan in collaboration with Douglas and the township and the school district to kind of create this joint 5-year recreation plan for the area. And so as part of our outreach and our process, we have focus groups set up with each individual community so we can hear specifically what your ideas are, your thoughts and concerns. We are also working with an overall steering committee to help guide the project in general. But we want to kind of hear what each community wants to do, and so that we can gather all that input and try to reconcile together with that and with what we hear for the public piece to that. So we've already met with the township, and then later today we're going to meet with Douglas and the school district. So it's kind of our first round, I guess, of focus groups with all you guys. And so you're probably aware that in order to be eligible for grants through the DNR, you have to have a current Parks and Rec master plan on file, and they require that you update it every 5 years. So generally, that is typically the main purpose why communities do these plans. However, there's other benefits to doing that. Obviously, it gives you a chance to look at your facilities and kind of evaluate what you have, what you need, what you're missing. Get you an idea of your perception, the public perception through your public outreach. So you get an idea of what the community perceives the facilities versus what maybe council or others in the community see. So you can kind of help reconcile that. It provides you an opportunity to set goals and objectives for future improvements, future developments. And so it lets you look at kind of the big picture stuff in addition to this little picture stuff, I guess. So you can think about things like sustainability and conservation and all the great things you've been talking about here at your meeting today, staffing for parks and things like that. And then it lets you also set a timetable through an action plan. So the DNR likes to see if you apply for a grant, they like to see that that project is inside your rec plan. So we always encourage you to include as much as you think you might do in that plan. So you might include some really pie in the sky type projects that today maybe you feel like there's no way you can do it, but you never know when an opportunity might come along or a donor or something like that. So we encourage you to include those type of projects. And then you also include specific projects that you think you can do, like the playground park project that you're talking about today, specific park projects that you can do. So you kind of have both in there. So it kind of covers you for all the bases. So I mentioned public input. So we do have a pretty robust public input process. And so we're working on an online survey. And I know you guys, I'm not sure if all of you have seen it, but we've put it out there as a draft and we're getting feedback now. We'll make the changes and then we'll set it out for one final review. This gives the community opportunity to, comfort their own home, get on the computer and provide feedback where they don't have to come to a meeting and interact. It's a little bit more safe for them. And we generally get a lot of good feedback through those surveys because there'll be, multiple choice or whatever, check boxes, but then there's also comment boxes where they can tell you all the things and you'll hear all the things. But it is very good, valuable feedback to have in the plan. We'll also have a public input open house. And so it's kind of like a drop-in 2-hour window where we'll be there. Hopefully maybe some of you can be there, and we'll have some stations set up, and this will kind of solicit input from the community regarding parks and recreation. And so it's a good opportunity for folks to kind of come in. They don't have to stay for the whole time. They can drop in, provide feedback, and oftentimes we'll have little handouts for them. Sometimes we'll have things where they can stick dots on things, just kind of make it interactive and fun for everybody. So we'll do that. We've also talked about a community event where maybe we would piggyback off of something that's already happening in the community, and we can come sit at the table and just kind of be there in the background and get people as they come through. So that gives us another, the intention is to try to get a diverse coverage and feedback. So we're not just getting a certain group, we're getting families, we're getting seniors, we're getting everybody kind of included in that. There's also a 30-day public review period. So once we have a draft of the plan put together, we're required to have a 30-day review period so anybody can come read it and kind of plan, provide feedback and input for that. And then there's public hearings as well. For whenever you guys take it to council, there's a public review period there as well. So there's lots of opportunities. I see a lot of head nodding, so it sounds like maybe you guys are familiar with this already, but just kind of wanted to reiterate that. And then I didn't know how familiar you guys are with the sections of the plan and what all goes into the plan. I'd be happy to give you a quick rundown of what's all in there if you think that'd be helpful. Don't want to assume anything, but generally the DNR kind of mandates certain sections that are required in the plan. You can always add more if you feel necessary, which we might in this community because you have the waterfront piece. So we might need to, expand that section a little bit. But generally there's a community description section, and that's just kind of like your demographics, description of the existing community in terms of topography, vegetation, and demographics, transportation, all that kind of stuff. And we'll probably regurgitate a lot of that information from the previous plan, since usually it doesn't change very often. There's an administrative structure piece. So that's where we describe a breakdown of how the hierarchy of the communities and how the leadership is set up in the different committees and different boards, what their roles are, how decisions are made. Includes things like the budgets for parks and the overall community and things like that. So it gives us a good understanding of how things work. There's the recreational inventory piece. So that's where we go out to each park, we do an inventory, we look at accessibility, what types of facilities you have. We make a big matrix and we list everything out. And we've already started actually doing that. So we've been to a bunch of your parks so far to start that process. And, we'll look at also we'll look at specific things that you guys control, and then we'll look at like county facilities or, maybe quasi-public type facilities as well. So we get a whole list of all the facilities that are available to the community members to get an idea of what's there. We'll describe the public input process. And so we'll kind of go through and say, here's the results, here's all the things that we did for public input. And we'll list all the results. We'll do a recreational needs and deficiencies analysis. So we kind of look at national park standards and we'll benchmark this community based on population, based on area, and see how it kind of compares with the national park. And those things kind of vary from community to community, and it's just a benchmark. It's not like, oh, you don't have enough baseball fields. We just kind of look at it and just kind of compare and contrast. We'll look at trends as well as part of that, and recreational trends and different types of sports, different type of activities, things like that. So all that's in that needs and deficiencies section. And then, so a lot of those things we can kind of do on our own, and we'll use a lot of information from the previous plans and carry those forward. But the last two sections, the goals and objectives and the action plan, those are the sections where we're really looking for your feedback and input, as well as input from the community. And so I talked a little bit about the goals and objectives, kind of generally are big picture, broad, things like, improvements to parks, non-motorized trails, land acquisition, things like that. So we'd like to try to get an idea from your point of view if the goals and objectives in the previous plan are still valid, if we need to tweak them, change them, delete them, whatever you see fit there. And then I mentioned the action plan, and that's where you describe your timetable for projects, what projects you'd like to do. And in this project, since it's a joint community plan, we're still kind of working out how we're gonna get all the community's projects listed in there in a kind of a cohesive overall joint type plan. But we still want to hear what your thoughts are on those types of things. And, the previous plan listed some projects. So are those projects still valid? Have you completed any of them? Those kind of things. We're looking for feedback from you guys as well.
If you would please approach the podium just so that it's recorded and people can hear. Sorry.
One thing that we've been talking about in our steering committee meeting is how this is all going to come together as a tri-community report, not just Saugatuck and Douglas, with this one unified effort. So in terms of goals and overall vision, something that we've talked about unpacking a bit more is what is the overall vision of the tri-community for the park system here? And what are some goals that we can all have and share together to work towards something that is maybe more regional as opposed to something that is just community specific? So that's something to think about too, in terms of goal setting for the city, how it plugs into the overall idea as well. So what we're working through right now is an overall vision statement for the tri-community park system with goals that each municipality can feed into, and then having like either sub goals or objectives then individually that each community has as well. So something overall, but then something that each municipality can tackle on together. Does that make sense?
And a tag team today. We weren't sure how this was going to be set up. So just real quick on the timeline, just want to make sure you guys are aware of the timeline. It is kind of a tight timeline at this point. The submittal date is February 1st. If you want to be eligible for grants in next year, 24, you have to submit by February 1st. And so our general timeline, if you kind of back it up, generally we earmark January for the approval. It's the approval month. So that's when we'll be going to the different councils and boards and getting approval, adoption for the plan. December is typically targeted for the 30-day review that I mentioned earlier. And we generally will run concurrently with that, the municipal review as well. So community's reviewing it, you guys are reviewing it, and then we're getting all that feedback at one time so we can make changes, kind of together. Then backing up October, November, that's when we're going to be really cranking on the report, so to speak, and doing the needs analysis. We'll have more steering committee meetings. We'll be back for a second round of focus groups with everybody once we've had a chance to get some input from the public and start doing some analysis as well.
I'm sorry, Jen. So the second bite of the apple for focus groups is October?
October, November. It's probably going to be November, I guess. Based on where we're at.
And that's after public input, which is September 21st for the, okay.
Yeah, we targeted August, September for the inventory, which we've started, as well as the public input, like the public input meeting. And, if we piggyback off of the community event. September just generally seems like a good time to, in our experience, to do these types of meetings once school's back in session and people are back on schedule. Back from vacations and stuff like that. So it works good in September to kind of get that public engagement piece going. And
Did you say we already did a focus group for Saugatuck, or we need to do the first one?
this is it.
That's what we're doing right now. Yeah.
With you guys. This is you guys.
Okay.
Well, focus group is a fancy word for just having a discussion about what your thoughts are for the community.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, I think this agenda pretty much lays out our focus groups. These are specific priorities for our parks and recreation.
Yeah, and so I mean, that's a good segue then into discussion. Feel free to jump in, Lindsay, as well, but you know, we kind of want to get an understanding of what's most important to you guys in terms of goals and potential projects, long-term priorities, big picture priorities. So kind of want to get your thoughts and
I saw your PDF that you sent earlier this morning, and I wasn't sure the dollar amounts in that. Is that from old studies or where was that pulled from? The slides that you sent earlier this morning, there was specific references to like different, like the playground, or there was
Yes,
different, and then there
so
were
I
dollar
pulled-
amounts that were.
Yes, I
is
pulled
from
that out of the
5-year
previous plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep, so, you know, the previous plan had, it listed a few projects. It listed the Coglin Park, Shoppers Dock,
Yeah.
improvements to Mount Baldhead, and some improvements to Oval Beach as specific actions by year. But then there was a chart or like a matrix of actions that had priorities attached to them, and that broke them down a little bit more. And the Village Square Playground was one of those items.
It's page 40.
It was actually scored as a very, interestingly enough. But yeah, so I included that in there just to kind of, you know, get your thoughts on what you think. Because we always like to try to get an idea of what can carry over from the previous plan and what should be forgotten. Or what has been achieved, you know, because generally we include like a little section at the beginning where we talk about things that have been achieved over the last 5 years. So I'm hoping you guys.
I mean, I went through it. You got a lot to do. I didn't do a lot. Yeah, so I mean, it's, you go through the 5-year plan, they listed it out as opportunities for improvements and what the discussion was about it. So, you know, I'll go through it, but I mean, a lot of it is, it's a lot that hasn't been a lot done.
Shopper docks were done, yeah.
And I thought of all the things. And that was the number one priority. That was their number one priority. It was, well, that's what they put on the priority list. Yeah.
Then now we've got new things that are rising to the priorities part of the playground, obviously is the top priority with, given the safety issues and things like that. I can get my head around the fact that that is the top priority.
And Mount
Mount Baldhead,
100%.
safety issues, yep.
Well, and just to me, modernizing it and making it more usable again. I mean, the people that present today, they're not wrong. Everything's moss covered and rotted. And if we want to, you know, I think about like activating spaces, if we really want to use them, we have to make them welcoming.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of simplistic things that we can do to clean that up and make that more welcoming. People are already using it, but they're not staying. They're doing the stairs and then they're not
Yeah.
using space. Like that whole space that's to the right in the parking lot is completely empty. Actually, I didn't even know there were trails up that way. So we have no sign that says that there's actually another trail system that comes up from the back of the pavilion. That's what we brought last week. I didn't know about that. That is around. That is around up the right-hand side of the steep slope. We walk. We do that. Yeah. We just left. Not a road. Stand. But I mean, the other thing is Oval Beach. I think there's so much that we could do with Oval Beach to modernize that, make your life easier. And it would.
Stuff I wanted is to make his life harder, actually. I already told you, house music, social district, cabanas. I have ideas. No, but I think,
that would, but then if we took that,
Yeah.
if we made that private sector.
the revenues then.
essentially, And had someone who really wanted to run that as a true restaurant versus.
That's a revenue.
It's a revenue builder, they can have a secondary business there, there's so much, but it's like, could we find a private-public partnership, like Brian done so many times, to come in and do that with us? And what's within the legal
But within, but to Ryan's point, like a lot of the stuff that we're working on are the things that are listed, but I do want to think beyond this. And that's what I sent you guys all individual emails about, like, think about the things that, like I'll give you an example of something that's not on here is, Coughlin Park. I think, restrooms and a fish cleaning station at Coughlin Park, and I've been told that we probably qualify for a big grant if we were willing and able to do that. But if we don't have it on the list, then we can't apply for a grant. So it's our opportunity right now to think about things that, like I said, Coughlin Park is not on here. It's certainly not a, you know,
This is to us, not necessarily to.
John.
So we're compiling a list today for us to put into this, and then it's gonna, we put it together and give it to you, or if it's council again, so where does it go forward?
It's gonna go from us to zero.
And then there'll be another,
Then there'll be public, then we get public input on September 21st. Is that,
you come back to us again to find.
that's the vote, the second focus group
With us.
with us.
Yeah, so we're trying to reconcile your wants and needs, the public's wants and needs, and then the overarching funds you mentioned, health, to overall.
So wouldn't we want to have like higher level goals that are, I don't know, I don't know how to word it, but if we think restrooms with coffee park, like to have all of our parks be, sanitary, I don't know what the word is. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
and not really, I mean, you know, right, obviously, user friendly and then, or something, I don't know.
But I would, so yeah, that could be something there, or like if you
And
think
we
that somebody else, if you
And
think
we
another
talked-
park
we
is not.
Also talked about, you know, sustainability, we talked about, you know, conservation. Are those the kind, I mean, those would be more the overarching goals, right? Are you asking us what we put on those?
And yes, and then also, to my mind, keeping in mind, we're doing this for a reason with the other municipalities and rec, is, you know, think about how things are integrated. Blue Star Trail is obviously a good example, right? But also pickleball courts. Do we need 17 pickleball courts if there's like 4 great ones a mile away, but then do we need to, so keeping in mind that like we are all such a tight community and not to operate in a silo that's just Saugatuck City. That's where I'm coming from anyway. That is my view, is that we don't operate as a solely. How many do we have for a population of?
Are you looking for suggestions now specifically too?
Yeah, I mean, we're open to hear,
All right,
That's
so-
what, and that's my impression that you take what we're saying now and kind of put it together and give us to you.
Yeah, I'll start off. Is there a way, are there grants available, since this all is geared towards grants, is my understanding, correct?
Well, both. Both, because we also want this to be our Parks and Public Works
So it's okay.
document to move forward.
Parts of public works, grants, everything. Is there a way, I want to increase awareness on the city's website for locally invasive species that are not just geared towards city projects. They're geared for my yard, what's growing in my yard, a list of invasive species, or a list of things that the typical homeowner can do in relation to trees that and shrubs and things that are plantable in our yards that will carbon capture. That will use less water. That we benefit from less water. I'm sorry, promote biodiversity. Right. Promote that biodiversity. Also help with drainage. In relation to that, promoting rain barrels, at the watershed, and, you know, help the watershed, and help the watershed by not putting, like, you know, down the street with or actually my street, so do not dump anything, or this grade goes directly into the river. So in promoting, in creating awareness amongst the people that live with, and even the people that don't live here, to short-term rentals, or we live here part-time. Just promoting a huge awareness of their way to,
How about, could you say this, like, creating awareness and education on being good stewards of the natural environment?
absolutely.
And that can encompass it in that, and both for locals and for visitors.
What I want to do is, as a homeowner, I want to be able to go and say, hey, these are bad, these are good. I can do this to make my standard of my quality of life better for my little, 66 by 140 years old. That would be one of my.
It's in no more May.
No more May.
That's in there.
Oh, and getting rid of the, cutting back on the, ordinance that's here.
So I think this is a really good example then of some long-term and short-term goals. So again, as kind of like a framework to help us like unpack all of this, because it's a lot to think about. There's so many things that you all want to do or have an idea for. So something like creating if like one of your goals then is to have this awareness and outreach for locals and visitors on how they can better steward the Lake Shore, the Lake Shore community. That would be like an overarching goal. And then in there, we can have some long-term and short-term objectives of how to get to that. So, short-term, it might be updating the website to have, invasive species identification and management practices. But maybe a long-term one then would be something like, I don't know, develop, work with the schools to develop some kind of like program activity to have some kind of, hands-on class. Or, something larger,
We're doing that.
Yeah, so you're doing something like that already, but,
Or-
do you know
I
that
gotcha.
makes more sense?
Or like go to No Mo May. That's a long-term goal. That's not gonna happen tomorrow.
Inserted into the 5-year plan, working with.
Are you saying no mo may?
No Mo
Like not
May.
May
Don't
in the
put your
middle?
grass in May. We're not gonna keep them up.
Which is the VMA. It's major pollinator.
I think a goal would be something a little bit even more lofty, like make Saugatuck and the surrounding area, a destination for, visiting nature or something.
Okay, do you
That's
guys,
that's a lofty one that then can be funneled down into objectives.
okay, tell me if this is helpful. So there's goals and objectives in our prior plan. I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but I think some of them are actually good. I'm like 5. So should I read them off? Like, does that help? Like stimulate thought? You can say yes or no.
Yeah, because I don't have that. in front of me.
Okay, so this is what's interesting to me, you guys, is this is in the end of the 5-year plan from last time. And so I'm also curious to hear from how you guys would do this, is that, do you have a format that you could share with us? Because what I liked in talking with you before is that I want to make this much more palatable. So I would love like a 1-pager of like for our overall,
Like an
in the
executive
local
summary.
one. Yeah, where it's like, if someone wants to know about our parks, they can go in and say, okay, here's our mission, here's our vision, here's our goals, here's our top priorities, right? And that's it. And if they don't go any further, they still have a feeling of who we are, right? And then ours needs to be much more granular in terms of deep dive of like, these are the actual activities that we're gonna act on, right? But for this one, it's all over the place and the goals and objectives are buried in the back. So if you could give us an outline even to like start to put our ideas to of like ones that you've seen that are just much more concise and sort of flow better, that's a possibility. I think that would be really helpful. It is. Okay, well.
What's the format? Wait, what's the,
This one or
this
what-
or
yeah.
what, yeah.
It is, okay. However you want to do it. We'll still give you, I have some that I pulled already that I'm gonna send over to a Dropbox. Some examples that we've worked on. Yeah. Well, I don't, do you want me to proceed like that or we'll do whatever you want?
I will say the only concern that I have is we do have to end at 12:30 by charter. So the thing that, yes, and exactly, they have a
Okay, all right.
Douglas meeting, 1 o'clock, but wait, but so now.
It'll help for her, so. Well, it
The
would
thing
be,
that I'm concerned about is I want remember when I sent you guys emails about come prepared with the things that you want to talk about, make sure they get on the plan. So I want to make sure that we have time for that as opposed to reading people from the, the 5-year plan that we all have. But I think that it's important that we let these guys know, like I said, I want to make sure that from my perspective, airport property absolutely needs to be on there, legitimizing the trails and airport property. Coughlin Park needs to be on there for, bathrooms and fish cleaning stations. Those would be my things that are top of mind, recycling and sustainability. Yeah. So those are the things that I am advocating for, but I would want everybody to be heard on the things that you're advocating for in the short time we have left.
And my sister, we just continue around.
Well, it is, it's in the township, but it's owned by the city.
And my thing from Basic Creatures website, public awareness, recommended comments for
and I would say for airport property, short term is legitimized trails, open to the public, legitimized trails. Long term is to get a plan for conservation. And then other pieces.
Point one. Yep. It's true. Don't forget about the point. That's true.
And then I would say Mount Baldwin.
And obviously the playground, which that's already, playgrounds are.
Playground.
Yeah.
But all of Village Square, I mean, the other spaces, I mean, it's a quadrant, so two of the other spaces are past their useful life too, that needs to be reimagined and used in more modern ways to help people.
Are you meeting with the schools also?
Today.
What about something, have you ever talked about kind of goals in terms of management or just kind of internal organization or structure or just kind of a long-term, sustainability of funding like Parks Millage, proposing a Parks Millage or anything like that?
I think that we've actually approached that. This committee is new as of last August, September. So that part is not, that's, the township has that and it's fantastic. And, I think that would be something that we'd like to look into in the future, but yeah, we have not gotten that established or an initiative for the ballot at all.
And to build on that, what you just said about structure, if we're trying to really integrate with the other communities, we don't just doing that right now, focus on, this parks. That, you know what I mean?
No.
So, like when we were trying to develop the bike trail, that was bike community, we don't have any kind of bike community about how we're going to create our.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what we're starting with right now, right? Is we're getting together now to connect with these folks.
They did a plan before just excluded us,
Mhm.
and I don't know that they actually had a structure for going beyond. So I'm just saying, one thing to have a structure for the plan, but how do we, actually do it? And, I think that was what you were sort of getting at was organization structure. Do we want to, try to come up with something that's really
Like an interlocal agreement moving forward for the core groups to work together.
Yes.
To do that. Tri-community public places, things like that. And then the other talk is the potential foundation.
Yeah, we talked about that.
But and do it interlocally versus just the top. And then people specify if they want their endowment to go to the city, public places, or if that's specific park, but it could go through that foundation.
But to create a foundation, I mean, we talked about it before, like, nobody when they die or give money away wants to just hand it to a city, right? So, but you might give it to a foundation who's got very specific objectives and no other places for that money to go to. So there is talk about establishing a foundation, but that's just, again, that's talk at this point.
So is that within our parameters due to the 5-year plan established funding? Or
of the tri-community area.
tri-community.
Yeah, I said anybody who donates could be like, this is, when I die, I want whatever, $100,000 to go to Mount Baldhead. I mean, you could, that would be my idea, of how that would work, is that you could donate something, have something earmarked.
Or,
Yeah.
or we could do singular and.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Or Allegan Community Foundation.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah.
So you're not recreating the whole.
Work with the county.
So I did, I mean, a little bit of homework I did, but, just to try to find other master plans because, purposes, conservation aspect of it, sustainability, and I found one that, Miami-Dade, has a vision basically to create a system in environmental zones for clusters of environmentally endangered land, and basically to focus on some that they really want to just preserve for, the species that are there, and some that they want to focus on maybe education of, how to take care of, just what's there, and, the things we talked about, signage and trails and, getting people access to things, without actually doing it. So I thought that was a good, overarching goal. And then we build out there, sure, that was there for but you need something to unify it and would also make it applicable to the other communities. So that was
I was gonna say something like that, it needs to be overarching first and not just talk about common purpose, those come in under it. So that's that overarching thing. And I think we're a destination as the art post, which I love, but I also want to be a destination as a, that we use our right words, preserve nature where people can be outside and enjoy it and, but for not only enjoyment, but health. Something like that. I don't know what the word.
that time craft even for tourism, because when I lived in the city of Chicago, I came over here so I could, with all the green space and how I see all the development happening. I'm fearful that we're gonna.
Maybe, yeah, we have something in there about green space. I like that word, conserving the green space.
I also would add to that is for all 4 seasons. We have something reflecting that when you compare this late summer push, but then in the winter, yeah, we need to invest in some of that.
Fun of ecotourism, ecotourism.
Yeah, that's probably good. Yeah, yeah.
To become an ecotourism destination.
I like it better as off-season. Like non-tourism, off-season.
Yeah, so we have enough tourists.
I'm looking, I ain't sad about Labor Day, like just bring it on.
Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the push-pull of tourism versus locals in these?
You do not have enough time for that.
I can speak to that.
Go ahead, Nancy, let Nancy speak to that.
Camera.
But I think that's it's,
All right, society, just in a quick nutshell, Saugatuck's 77% non-market, 23%. So it tells you how many still aren't living. Basically, if there's 1,000 homes, 700 to 700.
Hottest topic right now that we have is what we're gonna do about short-term rentals. That is the biggest topic in short-term rentals.
short-term rental.
Is, we've got a separate task force to address it, and they're going to have to bring something to count. We've got, consultants in a short-term task force to bring something to council with recommendations at the end of September for what the proposal looks like. With COVID, we're not unique, but with COVID, we've had a huge influx of investors in short-term rentals. Probably historically, not a lot's been done about it because usually it was like, oh, that was my grandma's cottage, so we rent it out to pay taxes in the summertime or whatever. That's no more. Now we've got outside investors that are just buying up properties like crazy. And so with that comes all the usual things: noise, trash, parking, traffic, people that don't understand how, that maybe you might be on vacation, but other people are getting up and going to work in the morning. So maybe we don't want to hear you regale your, bar adventures until 4 o'clock in the morning. So that stuff like that goes on. So I would say and I don't think that we're unique in that respect. It's just that it's been so exacerbated. over the last few years, that it's really, even just in the short time that I've witnessed it, it's just, when I think about, I mean, it's anecdotal, but on my street, we have 14 houses. In the last 4 that went for sale, all went from private ownership to straight up investors for it, 14, and that's been in 2 years. So that is very, that's a normal story if you hear people around. So that's kind of the push and pull between tourism and people do like the shoulder seasons and they are lovely, but I will say in the winter time when you can go for a walk in the woods and all you hear is the snow falling off the trees and all that, and not, you know, bachelorettes going crazy, and that's pretty nice too. So I'm
Yeah.
good with that.
Then the downside of that is not a lot to open.
Yeah.
And so our shoulder season has extended, so things are open. It used to be just Memorial Day to Labor Day, so now economically it's more April through September, October. So it's a little bit extended, but it's still kind of spotty. And so those that are full-time here, you gotta be, you can't get everything. And so area is to do that. So, and that's, again, it's not new, like you do that moving here. But it's part of it.
And it's, yeah, it's important to think about about those things too, in terms of what that means for green space and protecting sites like the airport site, and making sure that there's still that level of access. And then that they can also support in the busy season, you know, more and more use, you know, so that lays into the whole maintenance component of it.
Well, that could be, I think that would part of 5-year plan be promoting, Sagatuck that was for more year-round residential. Is that not part of our fleet,
I mean,
or is that a school?
no, I think, like, if you look at it, I think you can look at it in the lens of the way that, you want to improve your park system because you want to attract long-term residents to stay and invest in your community. And that's what essentially this is a tool for. The rec.
Okay, say it again.
What did I just say?
Something that this is a tool for. That
So,
this is
okay.
Attracting long-term residents.
Yeah. Okay, let me start again. This is a tool for you all to move forward in how you see improving your park system. So one, yes, you can use it for grant opportunities, but this is also a way to record down all of your hopes and dreams and kind of come up with a game plan for what you would like to do moving forward. So a grant funding is a large part of it because that's how you're gonna, you know, get support to accomplish these goals. But you can use this as a tool, however you would like to use it as a tool, because this is yours. This is gonna be your workbook. So it'll be a recording of everything that community says, or the recording of everything that we talk about today, or in the steering committee, or what Sagatuck Township says, or Douglas, you know, so this is going to just be, yeah, your guiding workbook moving forward, and then it'll change in 5 years again, you know, you'll have different priorities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So schools exist within our boundaries, right? We have middle school, high school. So coming from, I'm on the advisory board for Sagatuck Rec as well. We are completely maxed out in terms of our ball field and how kids can do their practices, the timing of it, everything, and even the quality of the fields themselves. So we don't have space to put that in Sagatuck proper. This would be something we work on with the township in Douglas potentially. So we want to put that comfortably in our plan as well, because it's something that we want our community to participate in, even though we know the only thing is it could potentially go in airport property, which is owned by the city in the township. So is that something, because if so, that is definitely something that I'd like to have.
So it seems like we keep losing families. How come we're out of space? You know, I mean, but we give out, we're increasing the number of kids that are.
People are active. I think the number is like 87% of kids have done at least one activity through Sagatuck Rec. It's like,
I just wondered, are these
Yeah, it's like
coming from
two-
Central or? you know, where we're getting all these kids.
That would be, we're not a district school system, but we're also, it's a statewide thing, so kids can.
Well, I know
But we-
schools, but I.
Yeah, we
think
have
that-
openings in every single school right now, so we're not maxed out by any means. However, but the kids that are here are participating and the programs become more robust. And so when you look at it, like, for instance, I just got an email today, for Sagatuck Middle School. We don't know when we're gonna practice because we have no idea what the situation is from the AD of which field will be available. If we get kicked off the soccer field, then we'll go over to the softball fields and we'll just manage that way. You have to remember, we have soccer is our number one was, at sport. We have the football field and we have football.
Okay. so
That's
we're-
it. There's 2 fields for every single age group. Plus, we have middle school students and high school students over there because they get bounced off because you have to remember our football field is our football and soccer field and cross country.
All right, so.
So it's activated on different levels. So we have multi-use in that because there's so few.
So we need a couple more soccer. Because actually football is actually declining from what I understand, how people are not allowed. Football. But so from what I understand yesterday, we got soccer program. has to be there. So let's put in the 5-year plan. We need, on the tri-community section, we're suggesting that the township, which is where all the men, even the Douglas. That we incorporate.
Like, we'll be meeting with Sagatuck / the schools this afternoon. So I had talked with Scott Keck, he's gonna have an updated offering as far as where we're at with the numbers that can be shared. And also, in a perfect world, what would the facility look like for that? And we have drawings from years back of like what the airport, remember, we got that as the airport property, what that would look like if we built that out just in the Pittsburgh area. And then that's not an appropriate space for it, for what we want to do with it, then I think there's a lot of other. But I guess my question is like, because it affects our citizens, we want to include in our. So I went through that. Baseball as well. I mean, football again. We literally have the school facility, and then we have, Schultz Park, and then we use the baseball field at Erie, which is the baseball field, and then the back end, we retrofit that for soccer and football, if you can't get on this. So all those pieces are really like that.
We have a women's baseball field, we have a guys baseball field, we have
There's the one at elementary school, and then there's the one, the softball field.
the elementary school is the base,
Guys play school.
the varsity. We want to be grade school, and across from high school, baseball. So,
And then we have baseball field that's for the little guys.
what about them?
So kids are practicing past dark.
Even the T-ball.
Anyway, you'll hear all about this in the next one. We don't, I don't think we need, as long as we're in agreement that.
Right, so we need some high level. We want to have adequate, recreational space or whatever, you know.
All right.
Okay.
That's good that we got that input. Isn't it?
We're gonna be going to I'm going to the other meetings too. I'm going to those.
The other question I have for you guys is, I mean, if we're going Pines guys long term, is like, do we want to talk about a community rec center? This is kind of 5 years, so the discussion might not be on the table now. We have a lot of other things to check off, but that's something to talk about. So if you've ever been to the one in Benville, so they have a track, they have courts that are converted for basketball, volleyball, pickleball. They have like a meeting space. And they basically it's multifunctional.
But when are you saying here, or you have it in the
So it would be, yeah, there's the only way, that would be, I don't know if it's true, but it would be potentially like a millage that would be added on to this rec millage, because that's something we already pay, all of us pay.
I think, so to me, now, I agree that it's almost like pie in the sky, but I will say I've seen it happen. I came from Pleasant Ridge, which is a very small community. It's really very similar to Saugatuck. It's only 1,000 people now. The difference is it's all resident, right? It was 1,000 parcels or whatever, but same kind of tax base and all that. But we had a beautiful rec center and we took a millage, we had a millage and there was an indoor, it was an outdoor pool, but all the kids, because the high school didn't have a pool, so the swim meets would take place there. Splash pad, but I know, but you know, I mean, it was a wonderful community center. I mean, they had a really nice, a gym there and there was a large place that you could rent out, but like the seniors would meet there and they would play cards every Tuesday or whatever. It was a community center and like, you know, we would have auctions there. We would have our any kind of fundraisers or whatever, and you could have it for private use, or you could bring something, you know, for a nonprofit or whatever. And it was really lovely. I mean, to me, that would be a dream that I would have for Saugatuck is that, and we talk so much about community here, and we really, and I think that, that would be something that I think would be lovely. And I've seen it happen, and I just know what a big asset that was to the community. People loved it.
And that bridges all ages, because for instance, in the winter, you have to perform to a private club if you're a retiree, you find play. But also for the younger kids, there is no place to play indoor basketball, and you do not have access. You can't just go access the school gyms. There's keys involved and trading that off, and that has not been.
And liability, people get funny about
If
insurance.
there's a
yeah.
practice, you can go, but those are not available. In general. So did- I mean, we have no swimming pool.
Scott's gotta go. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for sitting here. What's on your mind?
I mean, the other one too is we've talked collectively about Pigeon Creek, how much
Oh my
we
God.
admire that
Yeah.
space. And
Oh, yeah.
that's
Cross-country,
cross-country,
and
snowshoeing,
yeah.
that's lit, so that's something that would have expense, but like, you know, we talked about the airport property, which is legitimizing trails and making that part of that. And then we haven't talked about the landfill, you know, that's 30 acres that if we put that together, that could be a great four-season winter space where now we have sledding hill, we have for skiing hill, we have cross-country skiing, we have snowshoeing, and it's all, and well, that's great.
All right, so you can add that to your list too. Sledding hill, a skating rink, a warming house, 130-acre.
Hey, the other half can be solar, if we can get it
You can't
connected
do
to a grid.
solar, it doesn't look like it. One of the things.
Is that
yeah.
in the landfill?
What's that?
I think it's in the.
Oh, it's a landfill, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, I was
it's a
looking at the,
landfill,
okay.
not a-
As long as
That,
landfill's
there's nothing
closer.
to take it down.
Yes.
That's another 30. It's across the street.
But that's another thing that we're looking at with, the townships of the dog parks there, and they want to hook up the trails there's trails around the dog park. Dog park's kind of like 5 acres in the middle of it, and they've got trails around it, and then they want to hook that into the airport property. It would be really, really cool. Yeah.
That's a real connection.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I do want to mention that this Lisa's on the call, the CVB, they did a visionary study back in 2015, I think it was, for improvements, kind of pie in the sky improvements for public spaces. And the CVB recently met, and they're kind of bringing that plan back into play. And they're looking at that plan as the best option for them to have municipalities pursue grant opportunities. So
Okay.
I'll send that plan. If
That's
it's
the Extreme LAI's one, right?
Extreme LA, yeah.
Yes. I
Yeah.
saw that, and, yep.
So if it's okay with Lisa, I'll send that out to this committee so everyone can see it. Yeah.
Did you want to speak at all, Lisa? I can't, you're muted.
Only if you let me.
We're a chatty bunch.
I can, it's all good. I was waiting till public comments, but you tell me.
Go ahead, we can accommodate that.
Okay. Well, I'm Lisa Mize, Executive Director of the Saugatuck Douglas Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you. first, I appreciate so much what this committee is doing. I think it's fabulous. I love the conversation. I love the barrels, the parks, talking about green space. And I'm particularly interested in the Tri-Community Parks and Rec Master Plan update. Everything that I've heard about the pie in the sky projects is so in line with what the CBB is currently looking at and what Ryan referred to with Extreme LA and the stuff that was done back in 2015. We have a subcommittee put together right now to look at potential grant opportunities, and what you are discussing right now for the update to the master plan fits perfectly. So I hope you guys take a look at that Extreme LA charrette, and I'd love to have input into the master plan. But I love what the committee is doing. Thank you so much.
Can you explain what the Extreme LA is that what you're saying?
It was a group of students that came actually from Los Angeles, and they came for, I think, about a week and looked at the area, Saugatuck, Douglas, and the township. And they looked at ways to bring it together and utilize and utilize, what's the better word? Take a look at all the green space and make it more user-friendly. That's not the term I want, but it's the best that I can come up with right now. It came complete with drawings, renderings, suggestions. It came with all kinds of things. I can make sure that, well, Ryan's got the packet. He can push it out to everybody. They were all great suggestions. Obviously, we wouldn't go through with all of them, but it's a good starting place.
Lisa, just to add to that, that group of students, they worked with some Midwest architects. I think J.D.R. Smith Group, Mr. Ed Freer, some legends in the business as far as waterfront communities.
And thanks, Ryan. And the CVB is also, that subcommittee is meeting with two of those people next week. Let's see, John Scott from Landscape Forums and Richard Hereford, who is a Saugatuck resident, and he's also with Landscape Forums. So we're going to start the conversation with them next week as to what the next steps would be.
But city does maintain ownership.
City maintains ownership, and DPW currently is the one doing maintenance on all boards and all that.
Maintenance, so we have the easement, but there's all the agreements that we have in place with like Steve Butler, as an example, there's a maintenance agreement within of our street. But waterfront protection with boardwalk would be something that you'd want to improve. An extension of the boardwalk, where the process.
Okay. Thank you so much. We want that. We want that.
Waterfront protection and extension of boardwalk.
Yeah, is walkability something that could be part of for the whole
Yeah, I mean,
area, not just the waterfront, but
Yeah. So non-motorized trail connection, whether it's on the water.
Before wayfinding, somewhere in there.
And you'd probably like to do that interlocally, so it all makes sense. And
yeah, one of the big areas, that gets brought up all the time on the other side is that there is no real walkable way from, say, like the root beer barrel to Oval Beach. That Ferry Street, Park Street, all that. I live out there. If I want to go to Mount Bald Head, I drive. Yeah, no, you drive because you want to stay, alive. Well, it's not even just, it's not the residents, it's the people don't know what they're doing when they're driving them. They're looking this way and they're looking that way, and they're not really watching out. Yeah, in the morning. I know, that's a whole other issue. So at this point, are we gonna, so we do have to wrap up here. We're closing in on the 12:25, and I still have to go to public comment, which I think we're all set with. Is there anything we've missed? Yes, exactly. Is there something else that we need to give you guys that this is not our only bite at the apple. I mean, we're gonna be, connect, but, yes.
Promote it.
Can we give stuff to you after this?
Can I ask a question? So land use is like starts the prior survey. Is there a way, like they start off and they say how much acreage we have in residential, then it goes in commercial, industrial, agricultural, and then conservation. Is there a way to get an updated format on like how all of our land is used within the boundaries? I think that, I don't know if you guys think that's helpful, but it's like to understand.
I think it's helpful, but I'm wondering if that's something we do them or is it that.
This one's all over the place, so it gives like percentages, well, it gives percentages, acreages, and so then you understand like, how are we using everything here and how much of it, if we're gonna go with what Nancy mentioned way back when now, of like, we have zones. So we wanna have things connected, whether it's by pathway or green space. And we wanna know, like, how much are we designating? And so then that also gives us the go forward of, hey, if our boundaries are done, then how do we work locally with the township of Douglas to continue to contribute to, all of our, right?
Yes. Okay, so are we in a good place to go to member comments at this point? Okay. We will close out public comments because we just went through that. And so move on to member closing comments at this point, and that we do need to adjourn in 4 minutes. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys in Douglas in half an hour. Member Chair, if you'd like to say.
Okay, I absolutely love the, I learned a lot. Didn't do a comprehensive master plan on 106 pages. I think that, there's new ground that I can cover too, but, what my goals would be, start thinking resident. Don, excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what you said, and really, to emphasize this idea of, preserving our natural areas, but also encouraging education opportunities, so people can appreciate them. And figuring out, we need to do something at our last meeting, sort of suggested with our study groups, instead we kind of broaden, the aspects of that. It seemed to me like, can you think about that some more, and then think about how it was also separated or integrated with so I don't know, information, but it's still about it.
It feels like we're really making progress. All of a sudden, we've recommended something to city council. We have something that we're going to come back with you on in just a couple of weeks and recommend to city council. So, I'm in for.
I would say, I would like for the next meeting for us to really take a deep dive on this and for everybody to do a deep dive and come back. There's like lists out. And this is our chance, you guys. For us, this is great for interlocal, but like, this is our working orders for the next however many years we're gonna be on this committee. So we need to really get straight as far as what we're doing, not just for grants, but for in this community, and get numbers tied to it so that we don't feel so willy-nilly of like, what can we do, what can't we do? And this is the forward, the go forward. So.
Member comments. You gotta be careful about that.
So maybe we need another working session.
Thank you. Thank you. I would echo that we probably need another working session on this. There's just a lot to digest with the, 5-year plan. And I do agree that, I like the 5-year plan. We talk about long-term, but I'm also excited about short-term. I want to get before council, the park playground. Let's do that. We have 175,000 earmarked. We can come up with the rest of it. And I think we need to go big and, just propose it. So I'm there. And I would thank everybody for all their hard work and their 3 hours in the chair. Appreciate it. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
5-year plan, bathroom upstairs.
You have a motion to adjourn?
Okay, I motion.
All in favor? Yes. Listen, I was watching. Okay.